Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April meeting of Monash City Council. In the spirit of reconciliation, I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future. First off tonight, I'd like to thank our Return Service Leagues clubs, the Waverley RSL, the Clayton RSL and the Oakley Carnegie RSL for their hosting of what were very moving Anzac Day ceremonies around the city yesterday. I was at the dawn service in Glen Waverley and it was a great tribute to those people who have made extraordinary sacrifices for our country and its people. As a community, we often take for granted the freedoms we enjoy. We owe a huge debt to those who have put themselves in harm's way to protect our country and its freedoms. Last Saturday, we had another well-attended council listening post at Hamilton Place Shopping Centre in Mount Waverley. Once again, several community members raised with me concerns about overdevelopment and the loss of vegetation. These are concerns I share. Council has tried to respond to these concerns by introducing protections for local streets in our residential zone amendment C125 changes to the planning scheme. However, a few weeks ago, the state government introduced some changes to residential zones across Melbourne. These changes have the potential to intensify development in local streets. We'll be discussing these changes and Council's response during tonight's meeting. I'm meeting with the Minister for Planning, Richard Wynne, in May to discuss our community's concerns in person. I will also raise with the Minister our community's concerns regarding McMansions and the need for stronger state government regulations to prevent single dwellings being built boundary to boundary. Before we get into tonight's meeting, I wanted to note that tonight is the last council meeting for Christine McGinn from the Monash Leader, who is taking up a reporting role elsewhere. I really respect the role of local newspapers in keeping our community informed, and I thank Christine for her role in doing this over the last 18 months in her reporting in Monash. Christine has sat through some very long council meetings and she has been diligent in following up of issues of concern to the community. From my perspective, I've always appreciated that she has strived for balance in her reporting and she's always provided council with an opportunity to provide our perspective. We really wish Christine well in her future. I'm sure it'll be a bright one. We also have another person who is leaving. Ainsley Gowan is the manager of our communications department here at Council. Ainsley joined Monash in September 2012 and became the manager of communications in July 2013. Ainsley has worked tirelessly here at Monash. She is the first person in the building every day, without a doubt. She's answering emails and responding to social media posts late into the night. She started the listening posts, which have been such a successful way of keeping in touch with our community and giving our community the opportunity to provide feedback to us. She's also led our Sir John Monash Award program. Additionally, she overhauled the Monash Council website, resulting in a much easier to use platform, which is more informative and in particular more planning applications and information being available to the public. So although she hates to be put in the spotlight at all, I wanted to take this opportunity on behalf of Council to say thank you very much to Ainsley, who is just certainly one of the hardest workers in this organisation. So thank you, Ainsley. And now we will get into tonight's meeting. So we have apologies from Councillor Robert Davies tonight. Councillors, are there any disclosures of interest or conflicts of interest this evening? No? We now move on to confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 28th of March. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Little. And seconded by Councillor James. Any discussion, councillors? No, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Councillors, is there any reception or reading of petitions and joint letters? No? Any memorials, councillors? No. We'll now move on to public question time. And with that, I'll move a procedural motion to suspend standing orders. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fergus. And all those in favour of suspending standing orders? That is carried. And I'll now move a motion to bring item 7.5, questions for council, forward. I'd second that, Councillor Fergus. And all those in favour? And that is carried. So we'll now move into public question time. Our first question this evening comes from John Macy. John, are you here? Hello, John. I thought that was you. Would you like to come down to the front there, if you're comfortable to read your question? If you just like to, there's a microphone there, John. And Jared will just make sure that the microphone's cooperating for you.
I missed that. What was it?
He was just saying perhaps the journalist could have a smaller table and you wouldn't have to duck under the railing. John, would you like to read your question?
Well, first of all, I want to withdraw my second question. In view of what your earlier remarks, I can see that it's much more complicated than I first thought.
Okay.
So my question was, the preamble is, the highly desirable character and ambience of much of Mount Waverley, residential areas, owes a great deal to the existence of land covenant requirements. That's particularly around the Coleman Estate and around Lawrence Road, which include single dwelling construction. My question is, what is the Council's policy with regard to planning and building approvals which respect this single dwelling covenant condition?
Thank you for your question, John. I understand your concerns relate to the application Council has received to vary the covenant at 2 Ormiston Road and allow the construction of 2 dwellings. That part of Mount Waverley has remained relatively untouched by subdivisions and unit development, and I understand the strong desire of the community to maintain that neighbourhood character. In regards to your question about our policies, Council does not have a specific policy for covenants. Instead, we follow our legal responsibilities under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Under that Act, councils are required to receive planning applications and to assess them according to the rules. We are not allowed to reject planning applications outright without firstly assessing them. The Act states quite clearly that when a beneficiary to a covenant objects to that covenant being varied, then Council must refuse the application. I am told that at least one beneficiary has objected to this application, which means that Council would have to refuse the application. However, this refusal is able to be appealed to VCAT. Council expects to make a decision on this particular application in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much. I understand from talking to people in my area that VCAT tends to overrule pretty much anything the council wants to do anyway. I looked up the Melbourne planning scheme, and in my objection I pointed out a couple of paragraphs in that scheme, which I won't mention now, but what they say is that VCAT must, in making their decision, respects the existing neighbourhood character.
Yes.
So I have a strong suspicion that VCAT may be in breach of their own regulations. Anyway, I thank you for your support, Mayor.
You're very welcome.
And also for Councillor Sawyer. Thank you for your support too.
Thank you, John. The next question is from Ashley Hilton. Ashley, are you here this evening? Is Ashley here? No. Okay, so we'll provide a written response to Ashley. Our third question tonight comes from Juliana Iskander. Juliana, are you here this evening? Juliana? No? Okay, so we'll also provide a response in writing to Juliana. Our fourth question comes from Dennis Cheng. Dennis, would you like to come forward to read your question?
Sorry, just press the button there.
Yeah.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's right.
Good evening. I'm a resident of 6th Avenue in Gardeners Creek Reserve, and I'm concerned about the proposal for a synthetic sports surface. I've been corresponding with a number of you over this issue, and we still feel that our concerns aren't being heard, so this is why I'm here tonight. So my first question is in regards to the cost-benefit analysis that was put forward in the report in December, which Council voted on. I'm wondering if you can please explain why a 50 hours by 50 weeks formula was utilised, when we've been told that initial usage levels will be much lower than this. At the moment it's 24 hours a week, we've been told, and that's what officers want to maintain. Is it Council's intention to increase the playing hours to 50 hours by 50 weeks, or even less than that but more than what it is now? And if so, have officers fully investigated and considered the impacts that this increased usage will have on the local residents?
Okay, thank you for your question, Dennis. No, Council doesn't intend to increase the hours to as much as 50 hours for 50 weeks. This is simply the maximum that the ground could be used for. It's what the manufacturer advised Council could be the maximum use for this particular type of synthetic turf. The ground would largely be used between the hours of 4 p.m. and 9 p.m. weekdays and across the day on Saturdays and Sundays. We expect that it could be used up to 40 hours per week between February and September, and much less in the off-season. Council has considered and investigated the impact on local residents, and if this project goes ahead, we'll be putting in place measures to protect residents. These measures include regular patrols of the parking restrictions on the street, especially during game time and training times, and a 9 p.m. curfew, at which time the sport lights will turn off on weekends. Would you like to read your second question?
Could I just ask for some clarification on the first question?
Yes.
Thank you for the answer. With respect, we've been asking for patrols for a number of years now because of the increase, especially since 2014 when Mount Waverley's football club, the second club, moved in, and that's really when we've seen a major increase in the amount of traffic and the parking violations and issues with us being able to even enter our properties through the driveways with our vehicles and that sort of thing. Council's done nothing in the last 3 years. We've repeatedly asked for these and nothing's ever happened. So I'm sure you can understand our reservations about this. If you're going to increase it to 40 hours, that's an increase of 16 hours per week. You're saying 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. weekdays, so that's every day, plus weekends. So how can you guarantee that our amenity isn't going to be affected? I just don't understand how you can say that you're going to put measures in place when our amenity's already been affected over the last couple of years and nothing's been done, and now you want to push ahead with this, which is going to increase it by almost 100%.
We take that feedback on board, and thank you. We have worked with our community laws team to put together a program for going out and doing patrols at the times when the games and the training is on, and that's something that they'll be undertaking. I think what would be a really good way of following this up is to perhaps check in with you and some of the other residents in 6th Avenue every 4 weeks or so for the next few months to check how things are going with the parking and the traffic concerns. And if what we're doing is not actually, fixing the problem or helping, we can look at what other things we can do to improve it further. So I give you my undertaking that I will check in with you once a month for at least the next 3 months to see how that response is working out.
Okay. Can I just mention as well that I've been speaking to the traffic engineering manager, James Patterson, I believe his name is, and he's given me a response saying that based on the data that they've got, they're not going to do any traffic treatments or speed humps or whatever it might be, and as a previous traffic engineer, that's based on data which is not taken during the soccer seasons. The data which was taken during the soccer seasons from 2002, which is 15 years old. So I would really like to, if you're going to have that undertaking, that you make sure that your officers do their due diligence, especially during this season, and then if the construction is going to start in August, take that into account as well, because as soon as that construction starts, the traffic volumes are going to be totally different as well. and parking and everything. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to work with you and the other residents in 6th Avenue and our engineering team and our local laws team to make sure that these issues are looked after.
Can I also ask if you used 50 hours, 50 weeks for your cost-benefit analysis in the initial report to justify it, saying that, I think in the report it says that it's 3 times as cheap as maintenance and building a turf surface, but you're not actually going to do 50 hours by 50 weeks, then don't you need to revisit your cost-benefit analysis in your report and have a look at how much it's actually costing council, our rates really, to see if it's still a viable option? Because if you're not going to go to 50 hours, 50 weeks, but that's what you based your decision on last December, then I'd question that decision.
Dennis, if you don't mind, I haven't looked into the answer to that question, so I can look into that. There's another question that you were asking about noise. Did you want to ask that question? I'm sorry, but we need to limit our questions. I do apologise.
I would like to ask that. Can I? Okay. And if you're not going to answer that tonight, can I just say that the email that I sent a month ago had that question in there, and we got the response on Friday, and you still haven't answered that question. So I'm just going to put that out there as a comment.
Okay, well, I'm happy to answer the question now. Did you want to read it out?
Sure. So in regards to noise levels, we've been advised that council officers don't envisage any significant increase. However, they do acknowledge that there will be an increase in the evenings of training. Council's advised that tenant clubs will be reminded of their responsibilities to the community, and this will be enforced through their licence agreements, which stipulate that noise levels be kept to a minimum. I'd like to know what the minimum noise level actually is in their licence agreements and how council is going to monitor and enforce this.
Okay. So, thanks, Dennis. As we have previously advised, we don't anticipate any substantial increase in noise levels at Gardeners Reserve. Under the licence agreement between the Sports Club and Council, it is stipulated that the clubs must not cause or allow any loud noise or other nuisance, disturbance or annoyance to be made in or to emanate from the licensed area, which includes the ground and the pavilion, and shall, in meeting its obligations under this clause, comply with all guidelines issued by EPA Victoria in relation to noise. If this synthetic pitch was to be installed, Council will conduct random spot checks for noise for the first 3 months to ensure the clubs are complying with their requirements. Any issues will be taken up with the clubs immediately. Fail to resolve those issues regarding noise can result in Council terminating the licence agreement. As always, residents are welcome to contact Council at any time if they're concerned with the behaviour or noise generated from activities at the reserve, and we will promptly investigate. All right. Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Alice Polizos. Alice, are you here this evening? Alice? No, we'll provide a response in writing to Alice. And our final question tonight comes from Angelo Sticco. Angelo, are you here this evening? Angelo, would you like to come forward and ask your question?
Good evening. My name's Angelo Sticker, and Club President on behalf of the Mount Waverley City Soccer Club. I'd like to take this opportunity to inform councillors and visitors here tonight of the incredible impact and growth of the Mount Waverley City Soccer Club since its inception in 2015. Today we have 28 teams and over 340 children and 40 adults who are actively participating in soccer training and matches. Ours is a community club which take great pride in having over 80% of our players and families be residents of the City of Monash. Our charter is to give the members of the community a safe and inviting home where they can enjoy learning, playing soccer, keeping fit and active, making lifelong friendships and, most importantly, lifelong memories where in the future they can look back with pride and happiness on the time they spent playing at our club. Having said that, we require a safe facility, and the long-standing surface issues with pitch 2 at Gardeners Reserve, the uneven surface, the ease in which it gets flooded. I had some photos today which I've taken. I don't know if they were circulated, but the Ducks were having a great time this morning. These all represent the major issues and hurdles in our attempts to provide a safe environment. Safety aside, these problems also present scheduling issues, as we have on numerous occasions had to cancel training in order to preserve the integrity of the pitch. And there is no better example of this than tonight, where we've had to tell our players that they cannot train due to the problems presented by the rain over the last 48 hours. We're thrilled with the proposed development of the synthetic pitch, and we recognise the amazing opportunities it will provide not only our club members, present and future, but also the community at large. On behalf of the club members, I'd like to thank everyone within Council who has supported this project, and more broadly, I'd like to thank councillors and the members of the Recreation and Horticultural departments who have helped Mount Waverley in the first 2 years of life. I guess my question to you this evening is, what solutions can the Council offer to avoid the safety and scheduling problems presented by Pitch 2, should you choose not to pursue the synthetic option?
Thank you for your question, Angelo. I am very aware and very concerned about the safety issues for children playing on Pitch 2. As outlined in the report by Council staff that we'll be considering later tonight, Council has investigated a number of options, including creating a synthetic pitch or relaying natural turf. The officer's report identifies synthetic as the best option to address the safety and scheduling concerns that both clubs that play at Gardeners Reserve have. This is an issue where we need to balance the safety needs of children participating in sport with amenity concerns raised by local residents. In my view, it is possible to improve safety for children while also addressing those amenity concerns. If councillors don't support the recommendation to proceed with the synthetic pitch tonight, we will need to re-examine the options available that can help to mitigate those safety concerns. Thanks for your question, Angelo.
No worries. Thank you.
And now, moving on with tonight's meeting.
Can I move a procedural motion that, given we've probably got more than half the gallery here for 2.3, that we skip ahead to item 2.3 on the agenda?
Yes, absolutely. You just beat me to it. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on. Before we do, apologies. We need to resume standing orders. Would you like to move that?
Can I move a motion we unsuspend standing orders?
Yes, and would someone like to second that? Thank you. And all those in favour? Thank you. That is carried.
Mayor?
Yes.
Can I please move a procedural motion that we skip to item 2.3 on the agenda thanks to governance?
Yes. Sorry, thanks to
Just thanking governance.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yes, let's do that. I'll second that motion, and all those in favour of moving item 2.3 forward, and that is carried. So item 2.3 is community consultation, proposed synthetic soccer pitch at Gardeners Reserve. And do I have a mover for this report? Yes, thank you, Councillor James, and a seconder. Councillor Little, thank you. So I'm just making my way there. And councillors, is there any discussion on this item?
Yep.
Yes, Councillor James.
Sorry, thank you. And through you, Mayor, and I'd like to thank the 3 or 4 residents that contacted me with concerns over the synthetic pitch, and I certainly acknowledge your concerns, and I will be supporting this report, which is a bit disappointing probably to those that are in that camp, but I do, as I've said in all my email responses to you, will work with you to try and achieve the best results that will be adversely with the parking situation in particular, which is the major concern that most of them raised with you. And I understand, Mr Cheng, I think we had an email conversation briefly as well, that you say you've spoken to Mr Patterson and that you're not happy with his response, and I can stand here and say to you that we'll work with him and yourself to find a better response, as I'm sure other councillors will, and including the Mayor, so we can certainly do that. My primary reason for supporting this is that we went to consultation 3 times. We mailed 400 residents. We then went to consultation the second time, extended the scope and went to another 800 residents, and a number of objections, I'm told, are 3 to that. Now, obviously, that's a distinct minority, but that's the statistics that we're working with. I'm also a father of a young child, and I'm also a father of a 16-year-old girl. And my 16-year-old girl comes over on the weekend and spends half a day on iPads and iPhones and Facebook, and when she comes to get her dinner, she runs into a room with a plate of food and sits on her iPad, and that is of great concern to me as a father. So I think that we need to be doing all that we can to encourage our children to be active, to be fit, to be out there. I used to ride a bike around the street, walking to parks, running around, chasing my brother and sister down the
Thank you, Councillor James. Is there any other discussion? Thank you, Councillor Little.
Like Councillor James, and plus to the disappointment of a few residents in 6th Avenue, I too will be supporting this motion. A little bit of history, right? So there are 3 pitches at Gardeners Reserve. The middle pitch is the one that gets used for most of the practice. It's quite a large pitch. But at the moment, and I'm sure if you had a look at it right this moment, you'd see it's nothing much more than mud. Some of the pictures we've got from September of last year showed that this was a totally unusable area. It had degenerated to the point of literally a mud bath. It's unsafe for anybody to try and train on, unsafe for anybody to try and play any sort of sport on, although it did recover a bit after that. So when it gets to the mud stage, of course, what happens is the grass disappears. Then it takes enormous amounts of effort from council staff to try and recuperate that, try and get it back over the summer period to be used next year. And one of the reasons for this is that the whole pitch has never properly been drained. It's never had drainage set up properly. It's never been levelled. It's never had the drainage put in properly. What this very expensive. I mean, we don't go out to spend almost $3 million lightly. You know, in terms of council budgets, this is a significant amount of money. We don't go out to spend that money lightly, and a lot of that money is going to level the pitch and to dig down quite a depth, put proper drainage in, and henceforth make that a really usable area. The synthetic pitch, I think, has been explained already by 2 councillors and the mayor as being the best possible solution going forward. It was the only solution that will allow for the 25 hours a week that the pitch currently gets, and possibly a bit more in the future. Right. Bearing all of those things in mind, this is a very, very good proposal indeed. In terms of the objections that we've had, and we've had a lot of objections, well, a number of very strong objections over the last few days. Most of them do seem to come down to that issue of 6th Avenue and parking and problems with cars trying to find their way through, and some things have not been perhaps done quite as well as we would like to have done. What we have made is a commitment here tonight that we will make improvements in this area. I think having that in mind, again, I state this is a very strong proposal. It's a significant amount of money. It will be a vast improvement to Gardeners Reserve, and especially that second pitch, which is where most of the training goes on. And I really strongly commend this to the rest of Council.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Councillor, is there any other discussion on this item? Councillor McCloskey.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, I'll be brief if I could. A couple of points I'd like to raise in regard to this motion and the project contained therein. I'm a great advocate for sport generally, and coming from a different sport, but a different sort of football, but enjoyable nonetheless. From administrator and coach and a parent point of view, I understand the importance of not good facilities, but decent facilities as a bare minimum, and this report outlines that the facility that we're speaking about is nowhere near good enough and even probably not habitable in some sense in some time during the winter months. I concur completely with Councillor Little in particularly the remark when $2.9 million, guys, is a lot of money. And I can assure you, I come from a ward where that money would go a long, long way to improving facilities in lots of different sports. But I'm going to support this motion because I see the benefit. I also congratulate the residents that raised their concerns, and I'm supporting this motion with a few provisos that the Mayor's already outlined, in that we'll be ensuring that the best possible outcome and respect by both residents and stakeholders and users of the reserve are maintained, and that everybody is a winner out of this. We'll do our best to ensure that the facility is an up-to-grade, fantastic facility for all you kids and adults to use, and it's great to see so many of you there. And I'm glad we've moved this forward because it's a school night. You'll need to go and do your homework. But notwithstanding all that, if you've already been to training, I just hope that the clubs really appreciate what's been done on your behalf. Your clubs have advocated, especially for you young kids, in a really good fashion, as have your local ward councillors. But I'd ask that you respect the facility and respect the people that surround the facility. the residents' use and amenity is just as important as all the users and stakeholders at the reserve. And I'm heartened to hear other councillors say that they're going to support this motion and spend such a vast amount of money, because there's lots of areas in other parts of the municipality that will need similar sort of works, not synthetic and maybe not 3 million, but significant works to bring them up to a standard that's commensurate with sport and general and healthy activity for our youngest of citizens. So I congratulate your clubs and all those advocates on your behalf for getting the motion to this point. I commend the motion, but I just hope that, and I'll ensure personally, as other councils give an undertaking, that to the residents that have concerns about parking and amenity and traffic flow, and we'll work with all stakeholders, residents and the clubs and all users, to ensure that it's a good facility and it maintains amenity for all residents and not just the people that live there and not just the stakeholders in the reserve. But I can't wait to have a look at it. I think it's going to be a great facility when it finally gets up and going, and I hope you enjoy playing the soccer in many, many years to come.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Councillors, did anyone else wish to speak on this item? Okay, I'll just briefly say I have spent a long time talking to the clubs about the issues at Gardeners Reserve and the safety concerns that they have for all the kids and all the players that have been getting out there on pitch 2. They've spent a long time and a lot of hours talking to council about what needs to be done. I want to thank the club for all the hard work that they put in, for our community, for the kids in our community, for sport, and particularly for soccer. I have also spent a considerable amount of time looking at all the different. We've spent a considerable amount of time consulting with the community on this particular project. I've personally, emailed and spoken to a lot of people in the area about this particular project, and as I said earlier, we do have those concerns about traffic and parking, which we believe that we can we can commit to improve for all the people that live in that particular area, and I particularly agree with what Councillor McCluskey said, that and just with all the kids and so many people from the clubs here tonight, it is a lot of money that we're spending. It is in a residential area, and we do ask you to respect all the people that are living in that particular area, I look forward to the synthetic pitch work being done, and I also look forward to the traffic and the parking issues that have been so prevalent on 6th Avenue in the last couple of years, to those being rectified. So I will also be supporting this report tonight. Councillors, is there any other discussion? I will put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. We will move back to item 1.1 on the agenda, which is the state government changes to the residential zones. Do I have a mover for this item? Thank you. Councillor Ferguson, a seconder. Councillor McCluskey. Is there any discussion on this item, councillors? Yes, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly, I just wanted to express some disappointment with the way that the Victorian Government has gone about introducing these changes. I know that there were a significant number of officers here at Monash who were working long before I was elected to this council on some very significant changes to our planning scheme. And to have something like this dropped on us is not unusual, I understand, but it is nonetheless disappointing. I think the officers have done very well with the consideration of the changes in a short amount of time, and the direction that they're proposing we take with this report, I believe, should be supported. I think we have done our homework with regard to our planning scheme here, and our very considered work and debate on what we think is appropriate for the City of Monash runs the risk of being ridden over a little bit by these proposed changes. So I think it's very important that we support this motion this evening and continue to work to make sure we get the best outcome for our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 1.2 is the Monash National Employment and Innovation Cluster Draft Framework Plan. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Little, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor James. Any discussion? Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you very much, Mayor. It gives me great pleasure discussing the Monash Employment Cluster, the technology precinct that makes us so proud to be involved in, albeit in a minor way, because much of it is federal and state infrastructure. Monash University, Monash Medical Centre, which is now Monash Health, the synchrotron, CSIRO, and so many other great pieces of scientific technology. Mayor, as you know, this framework puts forward a vision. It's a vision that we have some concerns with, but overall we do support it as an organisation. I think from my personal perspective, I would have loved to have seen a bit more work done in regards to the proposed Rowville Rail Link, the station that is proposed for Monash University that will be positioned on North Road or Wellington Road, right outside the university, and going along to Rowville along that corridor. We know that there's a new Monash Children's Hospital that you attended the opening. You didn't open it. We would have liked to see you open it, but the Premier opened it, but you were there with him and others. There is the Monash Heart Hospital, which we hope will be funded, and the plans are underway there. The Westall Road extension to the Monash Freeway has been a long time in the planning stages, and that's covered in this framework as well. We hope that the government proceeds with that. We know that there's a massive industrial need for that in that sector, in obviously trucks and other freight needs, but also for our residents. We also know that the synchrotron wants 10 new beam lines to be funded, and that will give so many other opportunities to local businesses, but also Australian businesses and other businesses from other parts of the world coming into Monash. And we know that as of today, this precinct is potentially now a world leader when it comes to scientific research. So this framework is very important. If I can just close with the North Road Huntingdale Access Way. So this is covered to some respects under the Huntingdale work that has been done in this framework, but I get concerns often from people that have businesses in the Huntingdale industrial area. So if you can sort of south of North Road, who have, sorry, what's that? South of North Road, who have issues with their freight getting off North Road and this highway and Monash Freeway, and some of these roads are very narrow. So there is work to be done there. How many people try to get off North Road, Huntingdale? There's like 5 different exits and going around in circles and going, up and down and all this sort of stuff. So overall, in the long term, there is work to be done with how our road infrastructure interrelates with other infrastructure. And finally, I know I said finally, but in conclusion, we also have the Huntingdale train station and the work that will be done there by the government around a new bus interchange, and hopefully in the future platform 3 and 4 underground, which will go to Rowville. So this is very exciting. We hope that our concerns or our views are taken into consideration by the VPA, and as councillors we have a lot to do in terms of making our views known to the governments of the day at both levels, so that we can get the best outcomes for our city, but also for the nation and for Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zagrafis. Is there any other discussion on this item, councillors? Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I'd like to just echo Councillor Zagrafis' comments, particularly about his hope for more investment and planning of public transport in the area. I think there is significant work to do in that regard, and I hope that we continue to advocate for Rowville Rail. I'd also like to see some future further consideration of open space, particularly around Clayton and also the tree and vegetation plan for the area. As we all know, Clayton is one of the areas of Monash which has the least tree cover and the least green passive open space in the municipality, and I think that that's an important consideration as we bring more and more people into the area, that we provide the appropriate open spaces and vegetation to support that additional population and use.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this... sorry, Councillor Lake, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I think this is an exciting piece of strategic work that's been completed by the VPA, and I'm pleased that council officers have been closely engaged in some of the work that's led to its preparation, along with the Monash Medical Centre, Monash University, I think the synchrotron, maybe Bosch and a few other significant organisations in the cluster. This also involves two other councils, the City of Greater Dandenong and Kingston, who also have parts of their municipality which are also part of the Monash cluster. But it's very much centred around our municipality, around Monash University and the technology precinct that surrounds it. There's probably going to be no other area, well, I'm quite certain of this, there will be no other area of Monash that will change as much over the next 10 to 20 years as this part of Monash will change. This is already home to the most amount of jobs in Victoria outside of the CBD, and that is only going to grow in the future. And it's to the great benefit of everybody in Monash that happens, and not only people of Monash, but the people of Victoria, and in particular the people who live in the east and the southeast, who benefit greatly from having a university of the size and significance of Monash University, particularly its Clayton campus, but also Monash Medical Centre and the new Children's Hospital that is under, being built at the moment and will continue to be expanded into the future. This is not going to, though, be easy change for everybody to accept. There will be new activity centres or activity precincts that will be created throughout the cluster. There will be significant height that will be appropriate for this area, as far as building height that isn't currently present throughout the cluster. We need new offerings to make the cluster more attractive for the people who live in there, but particularly work in there and visit there to access the institutions that exist in the cluster. So things like hotels, more retail offerings, shopping options, supermarkets. These are all the sorts of things that are included in this framework. So I hope that this work will continue to be a high priority for this council. I think there needs to be more engagement and recognition from the local community around the significance of what is being planned here. I think I read somewhere that there was a consultation session that the VPA held that was only attended by about 5 or 6 people. I'm sure if somebody went and told the people of Clayton that in their neighbourhood in the next few years there might be building heights of 15 stories coming into their neighbourhood, it will be too late in 5 years' time to object to those applications. This is the framework that is going to make that a reality, and I think it's an appropriate reality, because this has the potential to be a world-class, a world-recognised research and technology hub, and we're lucky to have it. And I hope that we make full use of its potential, but obviously need to do it in a way that respects the existing suburban landscape and the people who live around there. Now's the time, I think, for this council to press any big picture infrastructure projects we want that we think will add to this cluster. So whether it be a Rowville rail link or improved road infrastructure, and there's proposals around all sorts of things down there. Now's the time for us to do that, to champion those infrastructure projects and to use our partners at those other institutions in the VPA, because never then what is coming in the next few years, will there be a better opportunity for council to get any of those projects across the line and secure government funding than at the moment with a framework like this and with the potential and enthusiasm from all three levels of government to make this cluster work as effectively as possible, so that we're part of that work. And I think that's got an exciting story to play out over the next few years.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. And was there any other feedback on this item, councillors? No, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Next item is 1.3, proposed new parking precinct plans for construction of multi-deck car parks in the Glen Waverley and Oakley activity centres. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor James, and a seconder, Councillor Little. Any discussion, councillors? Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And I wanted to thank our Director for City Development for bringing this report, and particularly to our Manager of Strategic Planning and Economic Development. I had to read that out, Julie, just before you have a laugh. I've got it written down there. Sean McNamee for his work on this report. And I think it's an exciting change. That's an exciting direction change for this council, and I might spell it out for those of you in the chamber and those watching at home as well. Previously, what we've done with trader contributions in Glen Waverley and Oakley is that we've required traders to supply X amount of car parks for their business. And in lieu of that, if they aren't able to provide those car parks, they're able to make a cash contribution, and that goes into our parking scheme, if you like, contribution. And then when we've got enough money in there, we'll fund the building of a car park, as we're currently doing down in Atkinson Street in Oakley. At the moment, we take about $22,000 from a trader towards a car parking, and then the cost of that building that car park is about $45,000 a space. I'm probably out by a couple of thousand, but there it'll take. So council effectively funds half of the car parks that we build for traders. What this report sets to do in our next scheme is to collect funding, for example, for 800 spaces, but then only build 400 spaces. So in effect, the traders are paying 100% of the cost of the car park, or thereabouts, give or take a bit of interest movement over that time. And that's an exciting thing. We're going to need to be clear, though, that if there's 800 parks that are needed to be built for people that are visiting trading or activity centres, there's not always going to be 800 people that are actually in that activity centre at that point of time. As you know, obviously people come and go, so the fact that's where we're making up the difference in halving the cost that we want. So this is, I think, a different strategic direction for us, and I think it's a fantastic one, and I'm happy to be on council when it was put forward. And anything that reduces the cost to our residents for car parking spaces is a win-win, because that's effectively $3 or $4 million every couple of years that we don't have to put into car parks, and that we can use to fund things like our synthetic pitches and to boost the sporting arenas in the Mulgrave ward that Councillor McCluskey is always banging on about. So thank you very much, Peter, for this report, and I commend it to the council.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Scraffis, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and I completely concur with Councillor James on much of what he said. Mayor, I just wanted to state that there will be community consultation on this amendment. I think there are two separate amendments, one for Glen Waverley, one for Oakley. My main interest is in the Oakley parking precinct overlay, initially anyway, and so I look forward to the community having its say on the amendment, the appropriate time. There is a statutory consultation process after the Minister gives his authorisation. There is a great Q&A table on page 5 for the community to see some answers that they might have. That includes stakeholders, traders, etc., community organisations. I look forward to them doing that. But also, whenever I'm in the Oakley Activity Centre, when I'm talking about parking, I always get the question of what's Oakley Central doing, shopping centre. Now, that's not covered under the proposed amendment, but it's related to parking in Oakley, and I would like to have a dialogue as a councillor with my colleagues, if they're interested, to get Vicinity, which owns Oakley Central, to come to the table and talk about the future. It's their land, they own it, but we do work together, and there might be ways that we can provide solutions in regards to parking in terms of some sort of investment in the future. So I look forward to these amendments coming back to council, and I'm sure we'll have much more to say in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagrafos. Any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that item is carried. Next item is 1.4, number 2, Drummond Street in Chadstone, the construction of 2 dwellings, and this has been called in to be decided by Councillor Casares. Do I have a mover for this report? Thank you. Councillor James, and a seconder. Councillor Fergus. Any discussion on this item? Thank you, Councillor Casares.
Thank you, Mayor. Council and the community that I will not be supporting the recommendation as printed. As we know, it's a refusal, and in doing so, should the support be there to refuse this refusal, I would be presenting an alternative recommendation for an approval. Mayor, in the short time that's available to me, because I don't know how the vote will go, I want to, in the onset, just thank those colleagues that were able to find the time in their day, in their busy schedule, to go out and visit Drummond Street, to get a real understanding of what the area is about, and at the same time visit Midlothian Street, a street which is only a stone's throw away from our city, runs off Warrigal Road, and it runs off the border of our city, and is a street which is a really good example of how side-by-side developments can work. A street which has some 60 homes, and on one side has 7 examples of side-by-side developments, and as we speak has 2 more in construction, and they will be delivered by year end. In trying to understand, in understanding why I feel the way I feel, I think it's important that I give a historical snapshot on our city and its dealings with side-by-side developments over the last 22 odd years since Monash became a city. In that period, Mayor, we've had about 3 definitely planning schemes that have been rolled out, and in all those occasions, in all those years, Council has not had the ability to consider side-by-side developments because it has been shackled by planning schemes that do not advocate or promote or support such outcomes. And in my view, that has been a flawed approach, one that I have spoken to many town planners and previous administrators over that journey. Mayor, some weeks ago we had the opportunity to adopt a new planning scheme for our city, C125, and whilst I didn't support the scheme at the time, I didn't do it for the substance reason. It was more about process, so I'll let that rest. But that scheme finally has unlocked those shackles of our officers, our planners, who do a fantastic job. And may I say, it's not an easy job. I wouldn't for a moment enjoy being a planner, because you're dealing with so many variables, particularly with people's emotions and their livelihoods. So in saying that, we're now in a position in our city where we've got that opportunity to look at side-by-side developments and give them the green light or give them the go-ahead, as long as they meet all the criteria of what's required of a planning scheme. And I believe that 2 Drummond Street does that. I think it does it well. I had the opportunity to work with council officer in planning and the architect who's representing the developer, and never before had I come across an architect who was so prepared to meet all the requirements of what was asked of them to get an outcome and a design which could find its way to being supported. But sadly it hasn't, and on the grounds of side-by-side and the potential lack of representation of character of the area has been described to me. And I find those words quite disturbing and difficult to measure. Character, what does it mean? How do we measure it? For me, good character, good outcomes are those that are respectful of the community and give good lifestyle opportunities for those that are living in those homes. And I think side-by-side, but particularly this development, does that in spades. It takes into consideration its neighbours on either side. Both dwellings are not quite identical. They are sympathetic to their neighbours and do all they can to meet those requirements of the planning scheme, which is I think is a good outcome, and it should always be a good measuring stick. But more broadly than that, Mayor, our city historically for 22 years has been hamstrung. It has been forced to adopt what's known as the gun barrel approach of developments, or two dwellings, one behind the other. They may have been okay many years ago, but other cities, Stonyton is a good example of that, have realised that they don't deliver the best outcomes, particularly for lifestyle and the amenities that go with that. And council for years was unable to unlock that. And we now have that opportunity, and I look forward to my colleagues supporting my view that I think this is a good outcome. It's a good starting point. It delivers good outcomes for those that will be living there in the future, and I hope my colleagues can support me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Casares. Is there any other discussion on this item, councillors? Councillor Little?
The issue here is this nature of a side-by-side, or two buildings basically sharing the middle of a block. Now, on a standard 15-metre block, what you basically end up with is a massive appearance, because the house itself is then narrowed down to probably something not much more than about 6 metres. There is, however, an exception here. This is a 19.2 metre block, and while that extra 4.2 metres may not seem a huge amount, it actually changes the geometry here quite significantly. Normally, I would not countenance side-by-side on a 15-metre block, but with a 19.2 metre block and limited options for the developers here, I think I'm going to be sympathetic with my colleague, Councillor Casares, and vote against the recommendation here. Normally, side-by-sides are visually massive because you're building basically from fence to fence. In this particular case, with two crossovers, doubly so. But as I said, there are mitigating factors here. The fact that it's 19.2 metres, which actually makes the building very comparable to situations where we have three side-by-sides on 2 blocks, and there are quite a few of those around Monash. So there you've got about 10 metres per building. Here you've got very close to 10 metres per building. So it's very comparable. Also, as Councillor Casares said, the architect has been very sympathetic and has listened to a number of recommendations from our planning department and has softened the visual impact of this design. And on that basis, and on the basis that we are not setting a precedent for side-by-side on a 15-metre block, I am prepared to vote against the recommendation and in sympathy with Councillor Casares.
Thank you.
Mayor, I've got a question through you.
Certainly.
To the Director of Planning. Councillor Casares mentioned the history since Monash was created. I just wanted to get a sense of why side-by-side applications were not allowed to be approved in the past. Is there a particular legal reason and a bit more context? Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, it's essentially a policy position of council that had been adopted to discourage multiple crossovers on a street was the main reason, but also from a character perspective. But the main intention was to reduce the number of crossings per allotment from a character perspective.
Thank you. Councillors, is there any other discussion on this item?
Sorry, just a further question, if I can, to the Director of City Development. Director, is the only reason this is being rejected because it's considered outside of neighbourhood character, or are there additional reasons?
Through you, Mayor, the report and the plans as submitted, there are a number of concerns with those, including the crossings, some character arguments and so forth. The applicant has prepared some amended plans that they've provided to council. Those plans have not been formally substituted and don't form part of the assessment of this application as it stands. So with the original plans that we're assessing and that we're looking to determine this application on, there are a number of concerns and issues.
Thank you. Any further discussion, councillors?
Just another question, if I may,
Yes.
and I don't know if this is allowed to be done, but can I ask Councillor Soy and perhaps yourself to explain, as Mount Waverley Ward councillors, where you both sit on this position?
Point of order. Mayor, point of order.
Yes, what's your point of order?
There's a long-standing practice that councillors aren't allowed to be forced to state their positions, and I just ask that you consider that before you initiate what Councillor James is asking.
Yes, that's fine. Sorry, I was just getting my microphone to work before I responded to Councillor James. Councillor James, I was already planning to speak on this. Wow. Thank you. Obviously my microphone is broken, so sorry about the delay. As I said, Councillor James, I was planning to speak on this motion already. As for Councillor Choi, whether he chooses or not to speak on the motion is entirely up to him. Sorry, Councillor James, did you want to make a further contribution on this item?
Well, I haven't executed my right to speak yet.
Okay. All right. Well, would you like me to go first? Please. Okay. So, would you like to go? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Choi would like to speak, please.
Yeah. In order to satisfy Councillor James, and I'm happy to give my point of view. I did visit the place during the campaign period, probably last September to October, and from my point of view, it's a area character that I would more supporting, let's say, lower density development. So for this one, I'm more aligned and supporting the council's department's advice to refuse it. So that's my point of view. But my respect to Councillor Casares and Councillor Litu to give their point of view as well. But I was still supporting the council department's advice to against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. I'll just briefly speak on this item. I have had an opportunity to thoroughly review this report, and I agree with Councillor Casares, and I thank him for bringing this report to Council. I do agree that in this instance, this particular type of development is appropriate for this particular street, and I understand some of the concerns that have been raised by the planning department, but in this instance, I think this type of development is a very good outcome for this particular site. Was there any other further discussion on this item, councillors? Councillor James, did you wish to speak? Yes.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And I've had a couple of conversations with, probably half the council on this matter, and Councillor Casares mentioned his alternative view, and I said to him an hour before this meeting that I wasn't going to support his view. But I did say that I'd come in here with an open mind, and I'm still probably don't know which way I'm going to vote until you call for a vote, to be completely honest with you. But fundamentally, I don't agree with side-to-side developments, and I don't. And I've been down to a place that Councillor Casares mentioned. I can't get that street name, Ethiopian or whatever it may be in East Melbourne. And I think a side-to-side development is fine if there's a single house next to it, which is the case in East Melbourne. Where my issue with side-to-side developments is when you get two or three in a row. A side-to-side development fundamentally is brick from one fence to another fence. And there's an example in 24 Poth Road, which is actually Maru Street in Hughesdale, where there's 3 or 4 side-to-sides together, and it just looks like a factory of houses walking down the street. That's where my problem with the side-to-side developments go. However, I take on note Councillor Little's point about it being 19.2 metres wide rather than the standard 15 metres, if you like, that'll be there. That's a considerable difference. That's almost 25% of the block extra wide. So I'm almost trying to convince myself as I speak. But look, that's where I stand on it. I don't like back-to-back developments, but I take Councillor Casares' view before the meeting tonight that in a side-to-side view you'll get a lot more backyard space, and I certainly remember growing up in a house that had a massive big backyard, and the front to back, if you like, developments that have been happening around Hughesdale and Oakley, certainly in the 5 years I've been there, mean that there's a hell of a lot of concrete around there and there's not much open space and grassland. So that's a contributing factor that I'm trying to convince myself on too. But I still don't know where I sit, but that's where I sit. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Lake. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to vote against the officer recommendation, and I just want to explain why, because as people know, my general starting point is to support the officers on planning, so I think they know more about it than all of us around this table put together. But in this instance, I am persuaded by Councillor Klasaris, and I have had some conversations with both him and the Director for City Development prior to this meeting to help me sort of reach the view that I've come to. And the decisive thing for me is, and it's actually different to Councillor Choi, there's no difference in density or impact for this site compared to Councillor Klasaris's preferred approval or the officer's preferred refusal. This application ticks all the boxes in law that we need to apply, other than this nebulous subjective thing of neighbourhood character and a subjective view of design guidelines. Now, the officers are quite right, I think quite legitimately placed to recommend to this council that we ought to refuse it, and certainly that approach is in line with what's been the previous practice of this council. But there's no basis that requires that position in our planning scheme. And what it effectively is it's a prejudice. It's a prejudice of this council that we've had this view. It's not the officer view, it's a view that those of us who have been around this table for some time have fully embraced and supported, that there is something preferable about, as Councillor Klasaris describes it, the battle axe type of development for a dual lock on a site, rather than two dwellings both being placed side by side with bigger backyards sitting behind it. And it hadn't been a question that I'd really thought about before hearing this discussed for the first time that I can recall at the briefing session last week when Councillor Klasaris raised this matter. And the more I've thought about it and been helped by discussions I've had, as I said, with the Director for City Development, who I don't know if he knew he was talking me out of his own recommendation, but that's been what the impact has been. I can't see any rational basis why we should have an automatic no to side-by-side development in Monash. Looking at the diagrams on page of the electronic copy 157, there's actually something preferable, in my view, about this view from the street than the conventional view I think of when I think of the more traditional battle axe development in Monash. I think there are some situations, and this being one of them, where this form of development looks like two quite separate houses. They're articulated, they're separated. I think that's quite appropriate. And I also come to this position also with the benefit of two of the last three houses that I've lived in, almost are perfect examples of what we're discussing tonight. One, the battle axe, where I lived in the unit at the back, and more recently, not with a common wall, but a block that's been subdivided with two houses, built side by side. And I think as we embrace denser living, and that, whether we want to or not, that's sort of the policy of successive state governments. We've got no choice. Where we do have choice is around how back gardens are configured, around how layouts are achieved. Big blocks like this one, over 700 square metres, how it's configured. And I don't think we should have an arbitrary rule that side by side is not a form of development that we'll tolerate here. I think it is appropriate, probably, almost in as many instances as the battle axe development. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote against the recommendation. I'm going to support an alternative one if the recommendation before us is not supported. And I also do it with the knowledge as well that almost certainly, if we refuse this application tonight, almost certainly it will be appealed to VCAT and it will be supported at VCAT. And I say, well, why pass the buck? Why not make the right and fair decision tonight? Leave the prejudice, to the side. And why shouldn't this be a precedent? I think it should be. I think this should be a signal to how we should address these sorts of developments in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Is there any other discussion on this item, councillors? No, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour in refusing this application? And those against? And that item is lost.
Thank you, Mayor. May I just like to distribute an alternative recommendation that's been prepared for by our officers.
So Councillor Casares, you're just handing out a alternative recommendation on this item?
Which I'm happy to move.
Yes. Thank you, and I'll second that.
Okay.
And is there any discussion?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Casares.
Mayor, I will not take up any more time. We have exhausted the discussion on this issue. This is just another recommendation which allows this development to go ahead. My understanding is it will come with amended plans, and it will also come with certain requirements to ensure that it meets all the requirements, and I look forward to the support of my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Casares. Any other discussion, councillors?
Can I maybe just ask a question?
Yes,
in light of the
Councillor
fact I haven't seen this document, can I ask the Director of City Development, was this prepared by planning, and are you happy with it as an alternative motion?
Through you, Mayor, it's been prepared with the aid of the planning staff, so therefore it's acceptable from my perspective.
Thank you. And any further discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this alternative recommendation to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? It is carried. The next item is 1.5, number 2, Howard Court in Clayton, the development of a 2-storey apartment building with basement car parking and additional 3rd storey. This is a refusal. Do I have a mover for this item? Thank you, Councillor Fergus, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Choi. Any discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 1.6, numbers 4 to 5, Tawonga Court in Glen Waverley, the construction of 5 double-storey dwellings and buildings and works within a special building overlay. Now, I just have some last-minute changes to make to that report. The developer has given us substituted plans, so the applicant has formally substituted the plans to be considered by council in relation to this application. Hard copies are being circulated to councillors currently. These plans need to be considered by the councillors as part of our decision making on this application. The substituted plans show minor changes to the first floor setback of dwellings 3 to 5, which are located along the site's rear boundary, and a change to the architectural styling of the proposed dwellings by introducing pitched roof form. These plans have been thoroughly considered by officers and do not change the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. Do I have a mover for this item? Thank you, Councillor Salumi, and seconded by Councillor Fergus. Councillors, is there any discussion on this item? Yes, Councillor Lake.
Thank you. I support the officer recommendation, but I just want to speak on a matter of process. I assume it is probably correct that the applicant has a right to have anything that they seek by way of changes considered by council, even at the point of whatever we are now. What is my watch has stopped? It's 8:17 p.m. And we have pages of A3 plans. We can't consider this. I rely totally on the advice of the officers that this doesn't change anything as far as their recommendation goes. But I think it's totally unfair for an applicant to revise plans and propose changes between plans going out publicly as part of an officer report on an application. And I don't think we should contemplate such things in the future. I think we should be prepared to allow applicants to amend plans up until, if it fits in with officer workloads, up until public notice of our agenda. But there's interested residents who are concerned about this application, some of whom have made contact with councillors, who are relying upon the report and the plans that have been advertised on Friday night being the things that we support tonight. It would be grossly unfair, in my view, and obviously hasn't happened tonight, but if an applicant between the Friday night of plans becoming public and an officer recommendation for refusal, simply taking the opportunity to make changes to their application to a point that it might change the officer view to then recommend an approval, and there we are at an hour into a council meeting on the hop making that change, when any resident who's diligently gone into our website to have a look at what was being proposed is none the wiser. The agenda when it comes to planning, particularly when it comes to refusals from officers, should crystallise when it gets advertised publicly. That's my view, and I don't think it's reasonable to us to share something like this with us in the process of making a decision. We can't properly consider it, but I'm pleased that the officers have advised that it doesn't change their recommendation for refusal. I would have voted for a refusal even if it did, because that's what they recommended and that's what I was comfortable with, and that's also what residents who have contacted me have told me how they want council to proceed with this application.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Councillors, is there any other discussion on this item? Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Councillor McCluskey, yes?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, just very briefly, I echo Councillor Lake's comments, and I too rely heavily, particularly in my somewhat stunted knowledge of planning compared to Councillor Lake's experience, and a good example would be Councillor Klasaris's earlier comments regarding an earlier planning application. A bit of work gets done. It's not just fly by night, just take the recommendation, move on, pass. And an example would have been 2 Drummond Street, where a number of us took the opportunity to go and have a look at some comparisons supplied by Councillor Klasaris and had conversations with planning officers. So there's a serious nature to it, and people have contacted me, like other councillors, with concerns, and I put some credence in those concerns because they live there. I don't, so I take the time to go and see some of those areas in which people have vented their concerns to us. So it's a degree of disappointment to get something on the fly like this, but I'll be happily go along with the officer's recommendation on this one.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Councillor James.
Thank you, and through you again, Mayor. And Councillor McCluskey beat me to stand up and say something, and he pretty much said what was about to come out of my mouth as well. And I certainly won't be swayed or swayed by developers to change my mind 5 minutes before a decision is about to be made. And to be honest, even if the officers had changed their recommendation to approval, I would have sat here and asked my fellow councillors to reject it and tell the developer to come back with a proper plan that can be considered, can be discussed by residents, and that councillors can have a chance to go and digest as well. And to be honest, as we spoke about last week with amendments that some councillors bring to this chamber at the last minute, I detest the fact that people try and get changes through or to try and make amendments by stealth. I think it's a despicable way to operate, and I condemn the developers for acting in this manner.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any further discussion, councillors? No. We'll put this refusal to the vote. All those in favour of refusing? And that is carried. Next item is 1.7, 18 Marcus Avenue in Mount Waverley, the removal of one tree within the vegetation protection overlay, and this is a refusal. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. A seconder? Councillor Choi, thank you. And any discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Next item is 1.8, 179 Clayton Road in Oakley East, the construction of a 3-storey apartment building comprising 10 dwellings and basement car park. This is also a refusal. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor James. And a seconder? Councillor Salumi. And any discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 1.9, 254 to 294 Wellington Road in Mulgrave. Buildings and works for the construction of a staged office development, use of part of the land for food and drink premises, alteration to a road in a road zone category 1, and buildings and works within a heritage overlay. Is there a mover for this item, councillors? Yep. Thank you, Councillor Fergus, and seconded by Councillor Little. And any discussion, councillors? Councillor Little?
I think it's astonishing that we have the VPA talking about rapid expansion of the Monash cluster, and here in the same meeting we have one of the, quite honestly, I think one of the most exciting looking projects that's come into this area for very many times. Just let me read a couple of the figures associated with this development. It's extraordinary. It's on a 13-hectare site, which is used to be the old Peters factory. We've got 4 office blocks going up. Each of these office blocks is going to be either 7 or 8 stories high. So these are significant buildings. Total office area, 60,583 square metres of office space. 60,000 square metres of office space. It's going to have 4 car parks. Each of these buildings will have a car park. These car parks are up to 6 stories high. And in total, almost 2,500 car parks on the site. It's landscaped. It has areas between the buildings which are going to be recreational in nature, places where staff who are operating in this development are going to be able to have their lunch in very pleasant conditions. It is going to respect the heritage overlay of the old Peters building. I don't actually say what they're going to do with the old Peters building, but it's going to still be there and it's still going to be preserved, and there is going to be a car park behind it, but that car park is essentially going to be fairly well hidden. This is an absolutely extraordinary development, a $120 million development. To see that come into the Monash cluster, to see it come before this council, I think is almost an honour. And it's a great report, and I do commend our officers for bringing it to us in this thing, and I thoroughly recommend it.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Councillors, is there any other discussion? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And I don't have anything to add to Councillor Little's statements. I think this is an absolutely magnificent report, but I did want to stand up and say something, because the Director of City Development had a jibe at us last week that we didn't talk on this proposal, given it's $120 million, but we squabbled over the cheap ones. So I just wanted to stand up and make our Director of City Development happy that I had discussed the issue, but I echo your thoughts, Councillor Little. I'm very excited to have this, and I'm really glad it's in our Oakley ward.
Any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that item is carried. Item 1.10 is 261 Clayton Road in Clayton, the construction of a 3 to 4 storey building containing 22 residential apartments above a basement car park and use of the site as a medical centre. Do I have a mover?
Mayor, can I move a procedural motion? The 3 Oakley Ward councillors have had discussions with this developer during the day today, and he seeks a deferral list of next council meeting as he has some issues he wishes to discuss with the planning department. I've had discussion with the Director of City Development today just on the 4th level, and officers say they won't support the 4th level, and the developer would like a chance to discuss that further with them. So I would move a procedural motion that we defer this to the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor James. As it's a procedural motion, we need to immediately put this to the vote. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Salumi. So all in favour of deferring this until next month? And that item is carried. Item 1.11 is 695 Warrigal Road in Chadstone, buildings and works associated with the construction of a multi-storey mixed-use building, use of the land for dwellings, reduction in residential visitor car parking requirement and vehicle access from roads within the road zone category 1. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Little, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor James. Any discussion on this item, councillors? Councillor Little?
Actually, I have a question to start with to the Director for City Development. One of the recommendations and the conditions for this site is quite a significant reduction in the heights of the buildings or the principal buildings. Could you please just clarify for us what the building will be with those changes made?
Through you, Mayor, essentially the recommendation will take 3 levels off the building, and that will leave that building at, sorry, Mayor, at 6 levels.
Gotcha, moment.
Sorry, I'm just playing with my microphone again, trying to get it working. Is there any further discussion on this item, councillors? Councillor Little?
I'll just say a few words. Can I just say, I think the amendments that the council is proposing to be made here are totally appropriate. This is actually almost a business site at the moment, right? So we're talking the block just north of Waverley Road, just on the eastern side of Warrigal Road, where
Flower Power.
Sorry?
Flower Power.
Flower Power, yes. It's right next to the Officeworks building. What used to be a large nursery is now proposed to be a residential development, and I think some retail on the ground floor. I think at 9 stories, which was the original proposal, that really would have been grossly over the top, and I think would have been inappropriate for that area. But seeing as we've got precedents in that area, I mean, I'm thinking of the building at Batesford, which is now, I think, 6 floors. I think a 6-storey building in this area on Warrigal Road in a fairly high density, or very close to an activity zone at Homeless Glen, I think it is an appropriate development. I sort of took my breath away a little bit when I first read the proposal, and then I sort of got into the text of it and suddenly realised that we were talking about taking the top 3 levels off, and for that reason alone I think it is an appropriate development. Also the fact that they're putting townhouses on the Collins Street side, which will mollify the presentation as you're looking at these residential blocks, I think is also very good architecturally and very clever in the way it's been presented. So I will be supporting this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Any other discussion on this item, councillors? No, we'll put this report to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 1.12 is number 2 Elwood Street in Notting Hill, the development of a Part 3, Part 4-storey building comprising 16 residential apartments above a semi-basement car park. And this is a refusal. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. A seconder? Councillor James, thank you. Any discussion on this, councillors? Okay, we'll put that item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 1.13 is our town planning schedules. Do I have a mover, councillors? Thank you, Councillor James, and seconded by Councillor Little. Is there any discussion on this item, councillors? No, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 1.14 is the leasing and licensing policy. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Seconder, Councillor Casares, thank you. Any discussion, councillors? Okay, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Moving on to community development and services. Item 2.1 is the Early Years Compact 2017 to 2027. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor McCluskey, and seconded by Councillor Little. Is there any discussion, councillors? No. I'll just briefly thank our community development team for all their work on this particular report, and commend it to my fellow councillors. Any further discussion? No. We'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 2.2 is sports ground fees and charges. Do I have a mover? Councillor Slimmy, seconded by Councillor Fergus. Thank you. And any discussion, councillors? Councillor McCluskey?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I'll commend the motion, and the part that I really want to try and touch upon it is the further consultation and clubs and how they're affected. I know there's a vast amount of clubs, organisations, and it's a very big job to review fees, charges, and come up with something that's fair and equitable rather for all. But I'm interested to see how this consultation goes, where it comes to at the end, and what feedback we get from all those clubs and organisations, because, as I was previously stated, I have some advantage in the area of knowing about trying to help run a junior sports club, for instance, and it's not exactly without its problems trying to make ends meet from year to year, season to season, and when it comes to making it affordable for our seniors and our juniors in any sport and any pastime, the more we can do to enhance and help that as an ongoing thing for our youngest residents particularly, I'm all in favour. So I'm keen to see how this goes. I compliment the Director and the Department on what they've done thus far, and I'm keen to see the results of how this consultation ends up and where it takes us in the near future.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Is there any other discussion on this item? Thank you, Councillor Casares.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, like Councillor McCluskey, I too have been administrator for a couple of years, and parent of a son who plays sport and daughter who participated also. Early on this evening, we all supported almost what we believe is a $3 million development of a new facility in our city, synthetic grass, lights and everything that goes with it. It's one thing to build it. I think then the challenge for us will be how do we continue to support that infrastructure, and how do we roll out a new infrastructure similar like moving forward? Because it's great to be building these things, but what we also need to be ensuring is that they are as far-reaching, the outcomes that are born out of them are as far-reaching as possible. We're going to talk the talk, we have to walk the walk. We want more women in sport participation. We want to support more younger people. We also want to support our seniors. We want to also stay active, because these grounds and these facilities are for all to be enjoyed and paid for by all ratepayers. So it's great. It's great to, and Councillor McCluskey put the nail on the head, it's great that we're continuing the consultation. I think it's important we get that right. Some years ago, this council will recall, for those of us that were part of that council that made a decision some 15 years ago, maybe less than that, to ensure that all our meeting spaces were offered to our seniors at a very critical rate, not for free. Because we identified back then the importance of supporting those citizens in our city who've done all the hard work, and we want to continue to stay engaged and active. And we took the right decision, in my view, to ensure that those spaces were made available to them at a rate that can be affordable and accessed by all. This is no different. This is no different. It looks at the other end of the spectrum. However, it does cross over to all ages. So, well done, Julie. I know, Julie, you've been very passionate about this, and you actually do walk the walk, because you're the one that flagged and identified that we need to do better in this space and ensure that we don't bog down our clubs and all those people that make them run, all those hundreds and hundreds of volunteers, by burdening on them fees and charges, which just simply cannot be met. And we currently have examples of such stresses in our community. So now I'm really proud to be part of this council. We do amazing work. We're sympathetic and compassionate when it comes to anything that delivers good social outcomes for our community as a whole, and I recommend recommendation to everyone, and I look forward to the findings of the consultation and the implementation of those findings in a way that will best serve all those involved.
Thank you, Councillor Casares. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, I'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 2.3, the community consultation for Gardens Reserve. We've already resolved on that item. So that brings us to corporate services. And item 3.1, which is the proposed 2017 to 2021 council plan and annual budget for the year 2017 to 18. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Little, and seconded by Councillor McCluskey. And any discussion, councillors? Thank you, Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say a big thank you to all the officers for their hard work on both the council plan and the budget. As a first-term councillor and being in my first year, I've really appreciated the amount of time and effort that you've all taken to consult with myself and my colleagues on a number of things. I know it must have been frustrating at times when I went through particular things line by line and asked a multitude of questions, but you've all been very accommodating, and it has helped me very much in my role and to come to a decision on some of these things. So I just wanted to thank you all. Thank you also to my colleagues for participating in this discussion in what I think was generally a very amiable and collegiate manner, and I hope that we can continue that process in future years. I just wanted to bring people's attention to a few items in the council plan, which I'm particularly pleased to see there. Some really core objectives, I think, such as delivering leading customer service, which I really think Monash does very well. Long-term infrastructure planning and, of course, responsive and sustainable waste management, which I hope will be improving as we consider our waste strategy later in the year. But more importantly, some bolder objectives, which we have in the draft, which I'm really pleased to see there, including proactively managing risks from climate change and reducing council's greenhouse emissions, and preserving and expanding our bushland and passive open space. Focus on the walkability of our city, which I know is particularly important to children, to older residents, to residents with a disability, and one that I'm also very proud of, supporting families and children and creating a child-friendly city. I do hope that my colleagues support these measures in the draft, and that the community takes part in the consultation that we'll be offering to have their say on these things. I'm also really pleased to see a number of items in the budget that I hope people will take the time to consider and provide us feedback on. But things like the development of a structure plan for Huntingdale, which Councillor James and myself have discussed in the past, I think is a really good initiative for people in the Huntingdale area, which will really improve livability and amenity in that area into the future. The construction of the Scammell Reserve Pavilion, which I think a lot of people involved with Scammell have been waiting for a very long time. Very pleased to see that there. A 40% increase to Council's sustainability budget, which I think will support those measures in the Council plan with regards to climate change into the future. And the construction of the Sindel to Highbury Road bicycle path, which I think is important to match our investment in roads, which is always significant. In future years, I hope that we're able to invest further in the preservation and expansion of our public open space, in lowering our greenhouse gas emissions in council and in the community, and also in addressing further the disparity between funding for roads and other local transport infrastructure. But I'm very happy to support the draft council plan and budget as is, and I look forward to speaking with residents and ratepayers over the course of the consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Casares. Thank you.
doesn't matter. I don't believe in it anyway. But there's only 3 people listening or watching, so good evening to everyone. But it's interesting if we that's exactly right. If we were, well, that's right. You can get up. If we were to compare budgets that have come and gone, how different they look and how different the city has looked and how the city has evolved. And I think as elected representatives, we're entrusted with not just the keys of the city, but the fiscal responsibility to ensure that when delivering and rolling out programs and the vision of our city, it's done in a way that takes everyone with them on that journey. I did learn a very important lesson during this process, and it's one that I'll share. I'll share with all of us, but I'll give some advice to my great mate Ozzy on the end there. Never miss budget discussions, because you never know what gets knocked off. And God bless Ozzy, he chose to go on a holiday at the most crucial time. But so we thank him for that, because a couple of roundabouts and speed humps never made it through. But the road isn't bumpy; it's nice and smooth. And moving forward, the city is in great hands, led obviously by a great CEO who's very diligent and runs an amazing team. Jack across the table, thank you for your guidance and all the advice you give us, of course, with all our other directors. It's the collective. This is a body of work that is born out of the collective, and that collective also includes the community. And the community is going to have a say to be part of that dialogue when this goes out for consultation. And I look forward to hearing from them. I think they should be happy. 2% rate increase is enough just for us to ensure we stay above the line. What our community will unfortunately discover come July 1 is that their valuations of their properties have gone through the roof. Those that are investors are going to get a rude shock when they get their notice from the Revenue Office. Land values have gone, skyrocketed over the last 12 months, and looking forward, they're not going to get any easier, which then brings me to the discussion of home affordability and ensuring that our community can stay in, and those coming through can continue to live in the community that they've grown up and have all those links. So there's a lot of challenges for us moving forward, but we at Monash, we do it well. We do it on the back of continually being the lowest rating council in Melbourne. We will continue to celebrate that, and as I said, great outcome. I look forward to the community being part of the dialogue, and look forward to rolling out what will be an exciting 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Casares. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, and I echo Councillor Fergus's comments on the officer's interaction with the new councillors. It was certainly a long process. Long process would be the best way of saying it, and I often say to Jack that I don't care how you pay for it, just pay for it and find the money, and he's certainly done that here, so I thank Jack for that. In the council plan, one of the changes that I advocated greatly for was the increase or the prioritisation of pedestrians in our activity centres, and I believe this is critical moving forward, particularly in Kingsway here in Glen Waverley and in Eaton Morden, Chester and Portman Street in Oakley, where we need to reduce, I suppose, the amount of cars that are going around our activity centre and encourage people to walk. Eaton Mall is a fantastic example of where that has been a great success, and hopefully we'll get something going in the Kingsway area as well. I'm pleased, unless most of my colleagues stand up here and make some amendments in the next 10 minutes, that I was able to meet 2 of my election commitments in the first budget, and they are a new play space for Samara Street in Notting Hill. Notting Hill and Mount Waverley, this side or south side of the freeway, I suppose, are probably the forgotten or the little sisters in the Oakley ward. The council's always talking about Oakley and Clayton, but those 2 areas seem to get left out. So I'm proud. I think it's 360,000, although no, it's 275,000 for a new play space in St Marta Street, and there's some plans moving forward with the neighbourhood Notting Hill House to change one of their existing play spaces in there to a nice community garden. So we're achieving some great outcomes for the areas of the ward, I suppose, that not have been neglected but have been, I suppose, a little bit unloved in the last couple of years. So I'm happy for them that we're getting that through. The other one, as Councillor Fergus touched on, was the commencement of a strategic or I don't know what you call it. Peter will help me out in a second. Master plan for the Huntingdale shopping strip. Again, we just tend to focus on Clayton and Oakley as our major shopping centres in the Oakley ward, and the Huntingdale shopping strip is one that needs a little bit of tender love and care. We put some new seats in there about 4 years ago, just before a council election, but now we're going to spend some funds on the next 3 or 4 years doing a proper plan and a streetscape plan and give that some love. My wife and I live 5-minute walk from the Oakley shopping centre, but we're always going down to the Huntingdale strip down there because you can pull your car up the front, you can walk into IGA, you can walk into the fish and chip shop, and you can be back home in 10 minutes, whereas at Oakley it takes you 10 to 20 minutes just to find a parking spot before you even get out of the car. So I commend this report to the council, and I think that there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, and I know that I texted Andy the CEO a couple of weeks ago, and she was lost in figures looking through the draft budget report, and we see it in a briefing session for 1 or 2 hours once a week and go, oh, these bloody figures are back again, but you guys live and breathe it for almost 3 or 4 months, and you probably have a lot of fighting internally, but you get there in the end, and it's much appreciated. And Aussie, if you can organise a trip around the same time next year, we can avoid those speed humps and roundabouts which took up half of our discretionary budget. What I will say before I sit down is that while we've got some great achievements in here for all of it, and I'm sure Councillor McCluskey will stand up soon and talk about the Columbia Reserve, which is a fantastic outcome for the Mulgrave ward, but while we've got some great achievements here, we've got about 40 things in the discretionary budget, but there are about 40 things that missed out. So they're 40 things that people around this desk would have liked to have seen and officers believe are priorities. So when people talk about rate capping and how the rate's so high, they need to realise there's a lot of priorities that are getting pushed back and not delivered on. And that, to me, is the upsetting thing, when you can't give the community what they want. So while we've got what we've got, there's a lot that's missing, but hopefully we can work towards delivering that for you next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Zagrafis, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This is a very good budget that we're putting forward to the people of Monash, and I'll talk about the budget exclusively, not the council plan, to save some time. A few points, Mayor. $16.8 million surplus, which is $13.9 million after you consider all the grants that council gets. We're putting in 2 new statutory planners to obviously cater for the increased number of applications that are coming through to the council. We hope that will alleviate some of the stress. I'm sure it won't go all the way. We'll probably be considering similar proposals in future years from our director. The Monash Pride crew will be having an additional resource for the Pinewood, Mount Waverley, Huntingdale and Sindel shopping areas. There's continued funding for the Monash Business Awards. There's an actual Christmas tree during Christmas in Edenwall, Oakley, and there's $20,000 for One Monash to strengthen our university partnership with Monash University. One Monash was my election slogan in 2008, by the way. But Mayor, there is something that concerns me, and that is with rate capping and with, as Councillor Classaris said, hard decisions that we have considered. I don't think that, in my opinion, we've considered saving a bit more money that we could have, and that's the $170,000 for a refurbishment to the Oakley Service Centre. Obviously, this is my view, but I believe that that's not a priority for 2017. That can certainly wait till the next financial year budget. Let me be very clear that we are very proud to have an office in Oakley to cater for our southern residents, communities, and the building is a fantastic building. So there's no doubt about that. But I think it does its job very well. I mean, for the people that go there on a daily basis, they have a front counter, they get to speak to our staff, they can pay their charges or fees that they need to pay. I just don't see how we're $170,000 will get that value for our residents and ratepayers, for officers, for a certain number of staff that might use it. That's $170,000 that can go towards new exercise equipment in Warrawee Park, or a new play space in Oakley, or a new play space anywhere for that matter, or even new governance officers to assist councillors. So I personally believe that's money that should be spent on other services. You know, we've redeveloped the Civic Centre over the years. I think this particular building does a great job. So that's my only concern. Overall, the budget is very, very good. And as I said, the numbers are very strong, and that's testament to our officers, absolutely, particularly in corporate services. So I look forward to even stronger budgets, but strong budgets in the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis. Is there any other discussion, councillors? Councillor McCluskey, thank you.
And on this, thank you, Mayor, and through you. On this occasion, I will be very brief, as I promised earlier, but didn't keep that promise. A difficult process in any organisation, any company, is the budgeting process, and this was not any different. I can assure anyone that's maybe interested in listening. So I congratulate all the officers involved, as well as councillors. It was a relatively bloodless exercise in a lot of ways, but maybe in order to assist Councillor Zagrafis, I think the funds allocated to the Monash, the council office at Oakley, was to make it a more user-friendly, interactive, and bulletproof glass, and it was a bit less sort of inviting for residents, and the hope was through our Director of Corporate Services that more people, residents in that area, would be able to utilise it in a better fashion and create more efficiency for the city. So that may help you, Councillor Zagrafis, in that area. But from a ward perspective, and I'm not trying to be ward-centric, but a good fillip for the Mulgrave ward will be a couple of developments, and I'm sure Councillor Klasaris, and in his absence Councillor Daves, I'm sure would agree, they've all worked hard in this space, was the Clumber Reserve Pavilion will be a fantastic initiative once realised, and I am sure that the development will start very soon, in that it's programmed for July for demolition and to be completed by March next year, and I'm quite sure that our officers and directors will be able to achieve those targets. It'll be a great venue for many users, many stakeholders, and the community generally, because what a part of the approach was to the last council in approving the funds was ensuring that the facility is not just a sporting pavilion facility, but a genuine community facility that can be used by nearby community groups, kindergartens, creches, bless you, and all those nearby stakeholders. So that's one good initiative, and I'm sure when everyone sees the fruit of that labour, they'll be quite pleased. Mulgrave Reserve is a vast expanse of green space. Again, it's a sporting facility, but it's a green space as well. And in the budget, there's funds set aside for a Mulgrave Reserve master plan, which we're quite pleased. All the Mulgrave councillors are quite excited about what that may bring. And again, as we'll see later in the agenda, the women in sport ethos and phenomenon is something that I'm sure all councillors are one voice here. We certainly are, the Mulgrave ward councillors. And the Mulgrave Reserve master plan, I envisage, will deliver some scope to further enhance that female participation and general better use of a fantastic open green space and sporting area. So there's lots more in the budget, but just from a ward perspective, we're quite pleased in one sense that some significant moves have been made in the Mulgrave ward. Lots of money being spent in other wards, but this is not a competition. We're a collaborative effort to try and get the best for the city, and I'm sure as the facilities become more familiar with two other councils in the Mulgrave ward, budget allocation will occur on an increasing basis in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Councillor Little, thank you.
And like Councillor McCluskey, I'll keep this very short. So just two very quick points. We're going forward, and we will be developing the Oakley Recreation Centre to accommodate the Waverley Gymnastics. This is a most exciting project, and we will see that start in the new year. And this has been incorporated part of the budget. And the second point I was going to make was, very much like Councillor James said a little bit earlier, this is a budget that's been done, and it is a tremendous piece of work, and it's a very, very readable document. In a very tight financial situation, we have a number of pressures. The rate capping at 2%. We have some increase in utility costs, about 300k extra in electricity, mostly in the increase in gas. We have more than 2% increase in wage increases, although we don't know exactly what that's going to be, but it's anticipated that it will be significantly more than 2%. And while CPI may be running at 2% on paper. When it actually comes to building, in fact, the increasing costs in the building industry is significantly more than 2%. I just want to make a quick comment. Although the rate cap has been set at the CPI level, the original recommendation by the Essential Services Commission was not to Minister Hutchins, it was not to make the rate cap the same as the CPI. It was actually a formula that was based on CPI plus something like 60% of the difference between the CPI and the anticipated rise in wages in the local government sector. So that actually would have put last year's rate cap at something much closer to 3% than 2.5%, and would put this one at much closer to 2.5% than 2%. The Minister has chosen to ignore that advice from the ESC and gone with her own, basically her own instincts. Anyway, back to the effects of rate capping, increases in utility costs, increases in employment costs, and those other pressures. As a result of this, our financial position going into 17-18 is going to be a bit worse than it was in 16-17. In fact, almost $3 million worse. And although we have such a good financial situation, we can absorb that sort of decrement. Going forward, if this continues for another 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years, heaven forbid, that will start to really impact on this council's ability to deliver services. But in every other respect, I would like to commend this budget. I think it's an absolutely fantastic document. Great contribute to our director for such a great piece of work.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Is there any other discussion on this item, councillors? Okay. I'll just make a couple of points. I agree with all that councillors have said. They've raised a number of points about some of the great projects that are in this current budget. And I've got a few that I'd like to point out. One is $2.6 million for the renewal of the Mount Waverley Community Centre and Youth Centre, which I think is long overdue. The construction of a new play space at Montpellier Gardens Estate in Burwood, which is a much forgotten area of the city. $600,000 to upgrade local bike paths, which I think most people agree is much needed, and funds to deliver initiatives and actions identified in the Monash Integrated Transport Strategy to look at how we move around the city, whether it be by cars, public transport, or through walking or cycling. $3.9 million for the renewal of various council halls and community centres, which we know are so well utilised by our community. So I think it's fantastic that we can commit some funding to upgrade some of those halls, which are obviously ageing facilities. And something that I've been very passionate about for some time, very happy about, is the preparation of a structure plan for Mount Waverley, particularly the Hamilton Place area, to look at the way we move around that particular area and what sort of improvements we can make to that centre to improve it for the people of Mount Waverley. So, like other councillors, I absolutely commend the cooperation of councillors, the hard work of staff in this process, and I commend it to all the councillors. So, I'll just check there's no other discussion, councillors. We'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Next item is 4.1, onto infrastructure, the contract for supply of airspace to receive waste from the waste transfer station and annual hard waste. Gee, they do some interesting things out in the infrastructure department. Do I have a mover, councillors? Thank you, Councillor Casares, and a seconder. Councillor Little. And any discussion on this item, councillors? Yes, just your mic,
yes,
thank you.
Could the director please expand on how you get airspace and rubbish and how it all works together there, Oz?
It refers to the volume of landfill that we require, I guess, so that's the airspace. So we pay according to, with the hard waste, according to the volume we dispose. Yeah.
So just to clarify, I think that's how high the rubbish is piled up, is that right?
Or how much space it can fill in the landfill, basically. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, is there any discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 4.2, level crossing removal project for Poth Road, Clayton Road and Centre Road, City of Monash Community Spaces Strategy. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor James. Seconded by Councillor Fergus. Any discussion, councillors? Yes, Councillor James.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. And I, as I've done a couple of times in this chamber, and as I will do again, I'd like to very much thank our LXRA consultant, Terry Tillison, who's been here longer than I've been alive. He's done some fantastic work on this project, and I know that James Patterson, our transport engineer, has been heavily involved in that as well. I just wanted to point out quickly something that I've discussed at length with Terry over the last week, and that we're also working with the state government and the Transport Minister to try and achieve. We've got some fantastic, in fact, unbelievable results underneath the elevated rail in the Clayton area, and I think that for those of you who haven't seen the plan, jump on our website and have a look, because it is phenomenal. The LXRA haven't fully committed to taking on every aspect, but the aspects that they have taken on is going to create a space that is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for this community. It's going to create some fantastic space down in Clayton. There's also some magnificent wins, and I know it's not part of Monash, but down in the Murrumbina area under the elevated rail there. But largely the LXRA has left the Hughesdale area alone, and this is where Terry and I have been doing a lot of work over the last week, and we're going to try and meet with the Transport Minister in due course and push our case on that front to try and, for those of you who don't know Hughesdale, the station's actually moving to the other side of Poth Road, so people will come out Dandenong bound onto Poth Road. Just across there where the existing station is, there's a little path to the right-hand side that goes down to Galbally Reserve, and it might be 2 or 3 metres wide, but I'm not really too good with measurements. You certainly wouldn't want to be walking down there alone at night, especially if you're female. I don't think I'd even want to walk down there myself in a dark, stingy alleyway. But the plans that we're working on are to widen that to about 12 to 13 metres and put some avenue of trees down there and some bright lights. And we're also looking to remove some of the car parking on the Hughesdale side and open up the forecourt a little bit, so that when someone comes down the escalators, walks out onto Poth Road, they'll look across at possibly a water fountain feature on the forecourt there, some nice greenery and some places to sit there, and two big avenues of trees that'll hopefully lead down to Galbally Reserve, and we're looking at maybe segregating that path into 2 sides and having a separation of cyclists and walkers. So it'll be an inviting avenue down to Galbally Reserve, which I believe that at the moment is very much underutilised, and unless you live probably within 100 to 200 metres of Galbally Reserve, you might not even know it existed. It's one of those hidden little gems in the corner of Monash. So I thank Terry for this report, and he's done an amazing amount of work on it, and it's just phenomenal to see so much passion. We've had a couple of community consultations. We've had one down at the Clayton Community Centre, which I attended. I also attended another one at Galbally Reserve, where we discussed a lot of the issues that residents had and a lot of things they'd like to see change.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes, what's your point of order?
Yeah, pursuant to our supplementary standing orders, it's past 9 o'clock, which means councillor is going to speak for 3 minutes, and it's just past 3 minutes.
Yes, no, that point of order is not upheld. That's incorrect. The Mayor has discretion after 9 o'clock to restrict speaking time to 3 minutes if the Mayor believes that it is likely that the meeting will not finish within our allotted time. Thank you. Councillor James.
That's okay, thank you. I was just wrapping up anyway. I just want to again thank Terry Tillison for all the work he's done on this, and I hope that he continues to do so, and I think that there'll be some great outcomes to our residents. So for the Director of Infrastructure, if you can pass that on, although I've already done that many times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. Is there any other discussion on this item, councillors? Yes, Councillor Little.
Yes, I also recommend the amount of work that's gone into this. It's very gratifying, and I'm hoping we continue to have an influence with the LXRA. In particular, with the SUP, the Shared User Path, which does look like one of most exciting parts of the potential outcomes from the Skyrail development. And in particular, the shared path as it has to go from south to north or north to south, depending which direction you're going in, at Oakley, which is part of the arrangement. And I'll just, if it's mine, I'll just read what we've written in our report here. At the moment, it's intended to use the underpass at Oakley for a shared bicycle and pedestrian use. But as anybody who knows, that tunnel underneath Oakley, the pedestrian underground, is way too heavily used to be shared with bicycles. So what we've written here is the head clearance of the underpass is too low and the access ramps are too narrow and steep for safe and practical use by the number of cyclists and pedestrians anticipated. Totally true. The safe and appropriate outcome would be, and we go on to recommend an outcome. Now, I'm hoping we do advocate to the LXRA in the strongest possible terms that they need to come up with something much more appropriate. The shared user path could be a very, very exciting development as part of the outcomes from the Skyrail. But this aspect of it really needs to be worked, and we really need to work hard on getting them to come on board with this.
Thank you, Councillor Little. Any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 4.3, tender for the provision of security services. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor James, and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Little. Any discussion? Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you, Mayor. I was interested to see that a security review was undertaken as part of this going out to tender, and I think that's very important in this day and age. The security situation of our organisation it's always been paramount, obviously, but I think more so than ever, and I'm not an expert, but just by observing attacks around the world on public officials and public officials dying in some cases, obviously in London and other areas that come to mind. I have been concerned the last maybe 3 or 4 months about our security situation. Now, you know, of course, I don't like to think of worst case scenarios, but we never know what can happen when you're in public office. So I'm particularly thinking about public council meetings. Now, obviously, tonight's meeting is very well attended, but you know, sometimes things can get very passionate and people have strong emotions. But also, because we're public and the doors are open downstairs, anyone can come in and out. So it's good that that was reviewed. When you enter Parliament, for example, in Spring Street, they've got a metal detector that I think Wilson, which is the same security organisation, has that contract. So I don't know where we will end up in future years, but it wouldn't surprise me if LGAs around the state go down that path in time, because you know, safety is paramount. It really is. And I raise that because it's easy to sort of get complacent, but all it takes is one event, one particular tragic event. We hope that that never happens, but that's all it takes, and then, you know, LGAs will be changing their procedures very quickly. So that's the point I wanted to make on this matter. Hopefully it's all catered for in the contract, and I look forward to discussing these matters with our officers in future years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 4.4, Councils and Emergencies Direction Paper MAV submission. Do I have a mover? Do I have a mover, councillors? Thank you, Councillor McCloskey, and seconded by Councillor James. Thank you. Any discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. That brings us to item 5.1. Assembly of Councillors record. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ferguson, a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Salumi. Any discussion on this item, councillors? Okay, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 6.1, Audit and Risk Committee minutes from the 7th of March 2017. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor James, and I'll second that item. Any discussion, councillors? No, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. That brings us to notice of motion. Item 7.1 is seeking state and federal financial contribution towards the refurbishment of Mount Waverley Community Centre and Mount Waverley Youth Centre, which is notice of motion from Councillor Choi. Councillor Choi, would you like to move this item? And seconded by Councillor James. Thank you. And Councillor Choi, would you like to discuss the item?
Through Mayor, Mount Waverley Community Centre is one of the iconic and very important project in Monash, so we would like to seeking for additional financial contribution and support from both the federal and state government. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Any other discussion, councillors? I'll just briefly say, as a fellow Mount Waverley Ward councillor, I thank Councillor Choi for his initiative on bringing us this report, and I'm hopeful that additional funds can be found. We have allocated $2.6 million in this budget to upgrade the facilities. However, further improvements could be done should we be able to gain further funding. So I thank you very much for your initiative. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Item 7.2 is matters of confidential business, and that is from Councillor Zagrafis. Councillor Zagrafis, would you like to move that item?
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to move it, but I think there's an alternative motion that will be put. What's that, Governance Officer?
It's an amendment.
It's an amendment.
An amendment to your motion? Yep.
All right. Well, I'm happy to move it, and if someone can move an amendment when it comes to
okay.
Council,
right. So moved by Councillor Zagrafis, seconded. Would someone like to second? Thank you, Councillor Choi.
And then I'll move an amendment to it if I can.
Okay. Yep. Yep. Okay.
I'll move the amendment before he seconds it, if you don't mind. So, point two, and I thank Councillor Zagrafis for having discussions with a number of councillors on this. So, point two adds that we recognise that in some, Council recognises that in some circumstances, using the title of an item may in itself cause a breach of confidentiality, and in such circumstances refer to the report by the relevance clause of Section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989, e.g. contractual or personnel matters, and authorises the Chief Executive Officer to make a determination on the title to be used.
Thank you, Councillor James. Is there any discussion on the amendment, councillors? Sorry, it was seconded by Councillor Fergus. So, any discussion on the amendment, councillors?
It's accepted by me, so
yep.
I've got no discussion.
Okay, and accepted by the original seconder of the MT. Are you accepting of the amendment as proposed? Yes? Okay, so that will now form the substantive motion. Oh, sorry, is it acceptable to the rest of the councillors? Okay, all right, so that would now form the substantive motion. Is there any discussion on this, councillors? Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you, Mayor, and I thank Council for passing that amendment. Mayor, the report is initiated by my motivation in regards to transparency and good governance as a principle. You will know that there's been media attention in the last few months broadly on councils making decisions in secret, and the Ombudsman did look at these issues in a report that is referred to in this report. So I see this as a simple change to bring council in line with many other councils. I don't have the exact numbers of how many of the 79 do name the title of their confidential reports in their public agendas. But I do know that in my brief, looking at the councils at Board of Monash, I couldn't see one that doesn't do it, obviously other than Monash. So I would be safe to say that it's at least it would be a majority of councils, but of course we can have a look at that, and I'm sure there'll be discussion from officers about when they do come back to us with particular ways of naming future reports. Of course, we can discuss that further, but I do think that this is something that we owe our community, to name titles of reports so that at least they've got an understanding of what council is doing on their behalf, that obviously the Act does have scope to allow councils to determine certain things away from the public domain, and that's for good measure. Many times there are contracts in place, other things are commercial in confidence issues, so that's good practice as well. But we can certainly, in my view, do better by passing this report. We do place our discretion in the CEO. If there's a particular report that, whether it's a notice of motion from a councillor or whether it's an officer report, and by having a particular title used, that could create. Thank you, Councillor James. My intention isn't that everything that's sort of put into a category like what it currently is at the moment. My intention is that the reports will be named as they would naturally be named otherwise. And just looking at this term's number of council reports that were considered in confidential business, up until this month's council meeting there were 16 council reports in confidential business. So I do think there's certainly enough reports being considered for there to be this particular change necessary. I conclude with those remarks, and I hope that council can support this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis. Is there any other discussion, councillors? Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Zagrafis, could you just switch your mic off? Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, and I thank Councillor Zagrafis for bringing this to motion to council, and I think there's universal support for it, or there certainly was in a brief chat that we had last week at a briefing session, and I think that there's not one person around this table that wants to hide anything from our community, and if anything, we want to be open and as transparent as we can. Just to clarify Councillor Zagrafis' remarks, and hopefully I'm not speaking for him because that's certainly not what I'm trying to do, but it's not that we're trying to make decisions in secret, it's that we're trying to keep confidential matters confidential, and they may be contractual requirements, and it's not unusual for government to do that. In fact, it's not unusual for a business to do that. Certainly at my workplace, we can't take anything that we do with contracts that work outside there. It certainly doesn't happen at state level or at federal level, and I'm sure I've seen Mick McGinn sitting over there. I'm sure the police don't walk out and talk about contracts that they may have as well. So it's certainly a commercial requirement. It's just a reality in this day and age. So there's definitely nothing that we've got secret, and there's no one in this room that wants to hold anything. Just another clarifying point too, and it is Councillor Zagrafis' report, so he may want to clarify it. But my understanding of the way this is written is that officers aren't coming back to us. We're resolving to implement this immediately, and it will take effect from the next meeting. Well, that's certainly the way I read it too. But again, I thank Councillor Zagrafis for bringing it here, and I'm, to be honest, surprised that it hasn't come before this council previously.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other discussion, councillors? Yes, Councillor Fergus, thanks.
I just wanted to thank Councillor Zagrafis for bringing this before Council. I think that with the amendment included, it's an entirely appropriate norm, and I think an important step, along with some of the other recent transparency measures such as live streaming and some reforms to public question time, which we've implemented already over this term of Council. I think it's a small change, but I think it's an important change, and as amended, I think it will see us thoroughly in keeping with the Act, and also in keeping with the expectations of residents and ratepayers that we're here to be doing work on behalf of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Any further discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 7.3, Monash membership to the South East Melbourne Manufacturing Alliance. This is my notice of motion, so I'll move it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Casares. Any discussion, councillors? I'll just briefly say I've brought this report to Council. I think it's very important. The South East Melbourne Manufacturers Alliance represent a very large number of manufacturers in the South East area, which we are a part of. A great number of those manufacturers fall into the City of Monash. This gives us an opportunity to work with those manufacturers to determine the needs of manufacturing and to understand how we as a city can support what they're doing. And they're bringing in many jobs into the City of Monash. We're actually the City of Monash has the largest number of employees coming into it outside of the City of Melbourne, and that's a fact that we're very proud of. We're have a very large employment sector here in the City of Monash, and I think it's important that we maintain good relationships with these large manufacturers to continue to see a lot of employment based here in the City of Monash, because it's fantastic for local residents to be only have to go 5 minutes down the road to their place of work. So I commend this report to councillors. Just check, is there any other discussion? No, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. The next item is 7.4, the establishment of a Friends Group for Scotchman's Creek, the southwest section in Oakley and Mount Waverley. This is from Councillor Fergus. Would you like to move that? Thank you. And I'll second that. Second this motion. Is there any discussion? Thank you, Councillor Fergus.
I want to thank my colleagues for their willingness to discuss this idea, and I hope that this motion passes this evening. Our existing Friends of groups in the City of Monash, both the Friends groups for Valley Reserve, Damper Creek and the northeast section of Scotchman's Creek, do a fantastic job in assisting Council by providing support for the maintenance and upgrade of the creeks and surrounding reserves. They're a fantastically committed group of people, although quite small groups at times, of very committed volunteers who contribute hundreds of hours, possibly thousands of hours each year to that work. I find it phenomenal how they keep going, and I believe they have a huge impact on some really vital natural assets in our municipality. That said, there's always more to do, and the existing Friends of Scotchman's Creek group are unable to do the work they do with the southwest section of the creek, the majority of which, the entirety of which falls in Oakley Ward. I've been approached by a number of residents, admittedly a small number, but it only takes a small number to get these sorts of things off the ground if they're as committed as our existing volunteers, who have said that they'd be interested in forming a Friends group to look after the southwest section of the Scotchman's Creek and to work with our teams at Monash Council to complete this vital work and make some really valuable improvements. And I would like my colleagues' support to endorse Council working with this group during the establishment of the new group, helping get set up. It's always really challenging for volunteers. They don't always have the know-how and the skills to get these things off the ground, and I think it would be really appreciated by local residents. And it would be of a huge benefit to this council and to the municipality, and most of all to Scotchman's Creek. So I commend this report to you, and I hope that we can work with residents in the local area to continue to beautify and improve the local environment.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, I'll just say thank you, Councillor Fergus, for working with those residents and bringing this notice of motion to us. As someone who works a lot with the Friends of Damper Creek and the Friends of Scotchman's Creek and sees the benefit of the work that they put in to the Mount Waverley area, I think it's vitally important that part of the creek, which at the moment is overlooked, is upgraded, and it's great to have local residents that are keen on doing that. So I hope your efforts pay off, and we are able to establish a Friends group for that particular section of Scotchman's Creek and see that looking just as fantastic as the other areas of Scotchman's Creek in Mount Waverley do. So thank you very much for bringing it to us. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Thank you. 7.5 is questions from the public at council meetings, which we dealt with earlier in the meeting. The following item is 7.6, Clayton Police Station. This is a notice of motion from Councillor Zagrafis. Councillor Zagrafis, would you like to move the item? Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Salimi. And any discussion, councillors? Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This report calls for council to take a position to support a financial allocation to refurbish the Clayton Police Station, and that will be coming from the government because an audit has found that it is currently not able to meet its service capability. Now, we know that Mount Waverley and Glen Waverley police stations were refurbished in recent years, and we've seen the great benefits that have come from that. The previous council had a position to have a 24-hour police station in Clayton. Being born and raised in Clayton, I take the operational viability of the Clayton Police Station very seriously. It's something that is constantly raised with me by residents about their local police stations being able to remain open and provide the best possible service as possible, counter service, having an officer there for many hours of the day as possible. And so without this particular funding allocation, that won't be able to be done up until the building is refurbished and it meets those standards. I wanted to thank Councillors James and Fergus for working constructively on this report. I think it meets a fine balance of concerns around community safety and trying to seek a beneficial outcome that provides political pressure, but certainly in a way that, you know, is respectful and tries to minimise any potential controversy. So I'm very happy with the way it's written. I hope that councillors agree with me that it seeks the right outcome from the government, and we hope that we hear good news in the very near future about this funding allocation being formalised by the Minister and by Big Poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis. Is there any other discussion? Councillor James, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, and just before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge Mick McGinn, who's the Commander of Police in Monash, for coming along tonight and for... Did I get the title right? It's Commander, isn't it? Local Area Inspector. Sorry, I don't want the Chief Commissioner looking down on this and thinking I've just given you a pay rise. So I'd like to thank Mick for coming along, and for Mick, it's done a bit of consultation with myself and a number of councillors over the last couple of weeks, and I thank Councillor Zagrafis for discussing with myself and Councillor Fergus to come with an outcome that I think everyone is happy with, including Mick himself. So just to clarify, Mick has some concerns, the Police Association also has some concerns that the current police station is not fit for purpose, and when we say that there's no access for disabled people to get into the police station, there's no toilet there, there's no interview room there, so while the police station is still going to be open 8 hours a day and there'll still be two police officers manning a counter, they're going to remove some of the police officers there and put them on active duty in other areas of Monash. So we certainly support anything that can be done from the state government to help fund an upgrade of the Clayton Police Station in whatever form that may be, whether it's to fix the existing conditions there or whether it's to rebuild the station completely or perhaps even move it to somewhere more suitable. But I thank Mick for his support, and I thank Councillor Zagrafis for coming to the ball and making this in something certainly that we as a council can support and should support.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor McCluskey, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, briefly again. I take it on trust that the motion and what it's trying to achieve. Ultimately, on a higher plane in one sense. The building is a building, and of course we want it to be fit for purpose, we want it to be active, and police presence in the community is a very important aspect, particularly of modern life. But a higher plane to me, and I don't mean to deride the motion itself, but just a consideration that personally I've full faith in VicPol Command in that they'll make operational decisions as they see fit. But I think that, as I said, on a more important or perhaps higher plane than the building and the structure itself is ensuring that the 120 or so members that serve as the City of Monash remain at least at that or more for the City of Monash. A greater concern to me, other than just the building and the facade or the desk when people are welcomed in, is more that we have the appropriate amount of police members servicing the City of Monash, and I believe it's around the 120 mark currently. And obviously we would at least expect that as a minimum and ongoing. So that would be my great hope, and I think, as I said, the motion's important in a sense in that it applies, I guess, political pressure, if you like. I don't particularly like the term, but pressure of a sort in a way to try and get a result that's a good outcome for the community, for the VicPol members and anyone that has to use the service currently located in Clayton Police Station. But as I say, this is important and hopefully it gets the right result, but ultimately resources are the key issue, and I have full trust that we will, at least, and my hope is that this may also generate a bit of security around the number of VicPol members that we have currently serving the City of Monash and its community.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Any other discussion? Councillor Casares, thank you.
Yeah. Mayor, I'm not quite sure where the anxiety is in Councillor Zagrafis and what his concerns are, and hopefully I'll be able to lay some of those concerns by just outlining some statistics or factual facts that in more recent times, which I think should give him some comfort that the Clayton Police Station isn't going anywhere and it will be refurbished, and unlike the previous government which closed the Murrumbina Station not once, twice, this government has got a really good record when it comes to the way it treats not only its members but respectful of its community and the services that our fine men and women do on a daily basis. So just as a matter of fact, $2.9 million has already been spent to refurbish 15 police stations in Bacchus Marsh, Bairnsdale, Benalla, Churchill, Cobden, Geelong, Lakes Entrance, Maffra, Moe, Mount Buller, Portland, Rosebud, Sorrento, Warragul and Warrnambool. $3.9 million to replace and refurbish 10 police stations across Victoria. $15 million to build a new police station in Mernda. $230 million in Victorian Police Complex in Spencer Street. So they're just some of the facts, and these are facts, that this government is doing all it can to support those men and women, to support its community, to upgrade facilities, not shut them down. Okay, because again, I don't understand what the driver is here, because we had a presentation by Mick. We know that there's no fear. I don't understand why we feel the need to write to the police minister when there is no basis for those fears. So the onus on us as good governors, when we're adhering to good governance principles, is to give our community all the comfort it requires when it comes to matters of security. And to be presenting a report here tonight which builds on speculation that something may not happen when we know that it will, I think is not good governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Casares. Is there any other discussion on this item, councillors? Thank you, Councillor Lake.
Thanks, Mayor. I wasn't going to say anything on this item, but I thought I might, and I just want to make the point that I think it's disappointing the way that the physical location of police stations by people on both sides of politics, and people probably on no side of politics as well, is used as a way of drumming up fear and anxiety amongst the community. And really, if anyone is interested in maximising the police presence and service in Monash, the way that would be best achieved right now would be to close the Clayton Police Station, to close the Mount Waverley Police Station, to close the Oakley Police Station, to close the Glen Waverley Police Station, and establish a new, fit-for-purpose, large facility somewhere fairly central in Monash. And that was the proposal that was touted very tentatively a few years ago as part of the Police Blue paper, and it got a little bit of media, and I think both sides of politics very quickly said, oh, we don't want to shut police stations, and we've never heard anything more from that. But it's very clear, it's what the police, or the previous police commissioner at least, has said is the most effective way of getting police on the street, rather than twiddling their thumbs, manning counters and satisfying minimum crewing requirements in operational stations. So the same people who pander to community anxiety around a station closing here or closing there are the same ones who are ensuring that we don't have as effective a police presence as we could on the ground. And I think it's time, to shift the way that, these matters are thought about. And I think the Monash community is mature enough to actually say, well, rather than having a police station within 10 minutes drive of where I live, I'm quite happy to have it within 15 minutes drive and know that when I go there, it's a 24-hour police station. It has modern facilities. It has a toilet I can use. It has, the right sort of counter service that's administered in an efficient way. And it's a nice facility. It celebrates the local community, perhaps has community art. It perhaps has a playground for kids to go and visit. It's the sort of facility like we might build, like the Clayton Community Centre. This is the challenge for Victoria Police, and it's the challenge for the political parties as well, who have this myopic focus around not even entertaining good policy around increasing the policing service because of this view that as soon as a police station shuts, it's a bad idea. The Murrumbeena police station, it's been mentioned. And there's plans I think I've seen from one side of politics to reopen that. I've never heard of a more ludicrous idea. It's less than a house. It couldn't even service two people living in it, let alone being an operational police station. In a suburban area like Monash, people don't need to be within walking distance of a police station. What people need is police on the beat who are in a position to respond nimbly and quickly to an incident. And at the moment, that's not maximised because of these old, decaying, falling down mirages of police presence that we have across these different facilities. So I don't think this motion is the right one. I don't sort of feel strongly enough to vote against. I'll probably abstain. But I think there's a better way that we should approach policing, and we should be able to be a progressive voice around the negativity that pervades, this issue, that preys on community anxiety, and we should say that we actually stand for improved facilities, improved services, and improved policing outcomes in Monash.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Is there any further discussion, councillors? Councillor Salini.
I wasn't going to say anything about this, but I do note that it is at Clayton, and Clayton Police Station would be very close to the Monash Medical Centre, and I would suspect that the medical centre would have a lot of need for police presence because of the use of ice and people with psychosis and psychotic episodes and the like. And I would have thought that probably the Clayton Police Station would be in a prime position to need to be refurbished and brought up to standard, especially as we are also, densification is also rife at the moment, and also it's not that far from Monash University. So I'd be in favour of this motion, and specifically, as I said before, because it is near Monash Medical Centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salumi. Any other discussion, Councillor Fergus?
The third one in a row to say I wasn't going to speak to this motion, Mayor, but I will now. I note the comments of Councillor Classaris and Councillor Lake. I don't agree that Councillor Zagrafis is whipping up anything with this motion as it has come to us tonight. I actually think Councillor Zagrafis had quite a different original motion in mind, and he's in a very considered way spoken to myself and Councillor James, who are his ward colleagues, to find something that's mutually agreeable to the three of us. This is not a motion I would have put myself, but I actually think that characterising what's in the motion now as sort of, any scaremongering or anything like that is quite unfair. I think Councillor Zagrafis has actually been at pains to ensure that what's here now doesn't do that, based on some of the conversations that we've had over the last week or so. I think it's a very straightforward motion. As Councillor Lake said, I'm of the same mind. I'm neither here nor there. I'm going to vote for this motion as it stands. I don't think it does any harm whatsoever, and I don't think it's making broader commentary about what Police Command should or shouldn't do. We've been informed by Police Command in Monash that there are some serious OH&S considerations with the Clayton Police Station as it stands, and all this is doing is basically supporting, I believe, what the local police command wants to do, which is to get the building refurbished. We're not making any other recommendations about what should or shouldn't happen. We've been told that's what they want to do, and that's all this motion seeks to support.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Any other discussion on this item? Well, I'll be the fourth person in a row to say I wasn't going to speak, but I will. I think people in the area need access to things like making a police report or JP services, and for the police in our community, when they're not actually out doing their police work and preventing crime in the community, they do need somewhere that they can do their paperwork safely without the roof caving in on them. The local area inspector believes that the upgrade is needed and that they doesn't currently meet OHS requirements, so I'm very supportive of this upgrade being done, but I understand that the funding is in hand, so I don't feel it's necessary to write to the Minister. However, I don't think it does any harm for us to throw our support behind the recommendations of the local area inspector. So I do feel a bit like some others on this particular motion. I don't feel it's strictly necessary, but I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with just saying to the Minister that we support our local area inspector in his endeavours to see the Clayton Police Station meet OH&S requirements for his officers. So, all right, is there any other discussion, councillors, before we put this to the vote? No, all those in favour? And those against? And those carried. Next item is 7.7, the Eastern Devils Women's Football Club contribution to the AFLW. This is a motion from Councillor McCluskey. Would you like to move that? Thank you. And a seconded by Councillor James. And would you like to speak to this, Councillor McCluskey?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mayor. It gives me a great pleasure to submit this motion for Council's consideration, Mayor. We're very fortunate to have one of a handful of standalone women's football clubs right here in the heart of Monash and indeed in the heart of Mulgrave Ward in the Eastern Devils. They've had a sort of longish history as far as women's football clubs go, but in recent times, through the stewardship of Joe Wooten, the president of the Eastern Devils, who share the Mulgrave Reserve facility with some other stakeholders, there's about 12 or 14 members of the Eastern Devils that were successful in securing a position on a list of one of the coveted positions at the AFL Women's inaugural season this past season, and they're great contributors to that and just women in sport generally. A couple of special mentions to people involved. There was Meg Hutchins, who was fortunate enough to be the Women's Football Operations Manager of the past season at Collingwood, with Brendan Major as the assistant coach there, both from the Eastern Devils. And another special mention was a Rising Star nominee was Catherine Smith. And the two luckiest, I guess, mayors from a parochial point of view were probably Jamie Lambert and Hannah Scott, who were both drafted to the mighty Western Border. So I congratulate those girls, probably even a fraction more so than the others, but it's great to see. The final special mention, Mayor, goes to Sarah Perkins, who was fortunate enough to play for the Adelaide club for the women in the women's competition, who were the ultimate premiers, and she was a great contributor. And I know for a fact that at a club I'm very close to, Waverley Park Hawks, we were fortunate, or some of the under 10, under 12 girls were very fortunate to have Sarah attend the club just this week to do the jumper presentation for those girls, and I'm reliably informed that it made the day of those girls, and it's just a really good connection that the club has. And I know they regularly visit football clubs generally, not just girls-only teams, and in Joe's words to me, Shane, we never say no. We just have to work around being able to do it and fashion it accordingly. But they're great contributors to women being involved in sport and the sport generally. And as a council, I know we welcome and we often talk about how we want to promote women in sport and healthy lifestyles and kids in sport generally, and good green spaces and good sporting facilities. And tonight we pledge as a council to spend 2.9 just on one facility alone. So all these things really dovetail beautifully into what I believe part of Monash is all about. And whilst we can have nice and shiny and brilliant new facilities for things or buildings or particular purposes, it's great to be able to have facilities and green space and sporting fields for women such as these and young girls such as these ladies, the Eastern Devils, to really contribute positively to the city of Monash and lives of similar sporting groups as well as particularly younger people. So I really would like to congratulate the Eastern Devils and Jo Wootton and her stewardship and her committee. They've built this to 3 or 4 teams now, and they're growing. And I hope, as I'm sure my Mulgrave Ward colleagues do, that as we've mentioned previously in the upcoming draft budget, or hopefully will be approved in the end, part of that is the Mulgrave Reserve Master Plan, which may hopefully throw up some initiatives and some solutions to better accommodate those ladies and all the sporting stakeholders at Mulgrave Reserve, and further enhance and further entrench the city of Monash as a flagship municipality in promoting just healthy lifestyles and women in sport. So I commend the motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Jones, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Well, I was always going to speak in this motion because any motion that comes before council that involves football, I'm all for. And the more motions we get towards council that I can stand up and talk about footy, the better it is again. I'm a sport nut of all, except for soccer. They've gone, so I can say that. But I'm a sport nut of all codes, and I often watch 5 or 6 games of football on the weekend. When I can't sleep at night, I'll get up and watch reruns. And I was very pleased that at the start of the season, when cricket had finished and the AFL hadn't started up again, that the AFLW came on. And my oldest daughter, a 16-year-old daughter, is a mad Collingwood fan, and I'm a mad Melbourne fan. And I remember going out to Princess Park out in Carlton there with her and her auntie and watching a Melbourne-Collingwood game out there. Fantastic game. Melbourne came back and won, for those of you that may be interested in that. But I'm all for it. And just to see the joy on her face and her sisters and when they were getting there and seeing that women were coming out and playing football, and what it does do is it gives them another avenue to pursue, and it makes them believe in themselves and that they're part of, I suppose, what culturally in Melbourne is very important to all of us in football. It's not always AFL, it could be soccer or netball or basketball, whatever it is, but I think the majority of people have a real passion for sport in Melbourne, and that's what makes this city so fantastic. So it's absolutely sensational that through our local sporting clubs and through the AFLW in general, that we're encouraging women and girls to get involved in these sort of sports. And I was down at the Oakley Crushers, down at Scammell Reserve there a couple of weeks ago, and they had their season launch. And they mentioned that they've got a girls' team this year for the first time ever, and have no doubt that that's part of the AFLW's promotion of women's football. And they had 16 girls that were a bunch of friends that walked into the club and said, "We want to play footy." And they said, "Jesus Christ, we've got 16 people already towards it." And they only had to go out and find another 5 or 6. And they've now got 32 girls for a 22-woman squad, sorry, I should say. So it's fantastic to see this popping up, not only at the AFLW, but the impact that it has at local sporting level. And as I said earlier when we were discussing a synthetic pitch, anything that gets kids away from iPads and computers and out to sporting fields and be active and fit is something that I'm all for. So I thank Councillor McCluskey for bringing this forward, and I congratulate all those girls, particularly Pepper Randell and Catherine Smith, absolute superstars, those two, and thank you for bringing this.
Thank you, Councillor James. Any other discussion, councillors? Well, I will just say thank you for bringing this forward, Councillor McCluskey. I think it's very important to recognise the Eastern Devils and the time and the effort that they've put into women's footy. Also to recognise these women and the contribution that they're making to the AFLW code. As a girl growing up, my father was a football coach, a local footy coach. I was able to play footy in grade 5, but the following year I wasn't allowed to play because the boys didn't like a girl playing footy. I always wondered why, I couldn't get out there and play footy like everybody else did, and instead just had to hang around training and collect up balls and put out cones. So I'm very happy to see a time when women are able to play footy. I'm very happy that my 2 daughters are growing up in a time where women are able to play footy, and that we have now reached this point. Not only we see women playing football now, this league launched this year, but we've recently seen the 2020 competition, the BBL competition for cricket, where women have been going great guns in that. And again, I played cricket growing up as a female, and there wasn't a lot of opportunities at that stage. So to me, it's great to be part of a council that spends so much money and time and effort into encouraging women's sporting activities in the city, particularly for those codes which have been male-dominated in the past. And I want to thank Councillor McCluskey again for bringing this forward, for celebrating these women, this club and what they're doing. And I also like to say, you said the girls would never say no to going out to visit a club, and that's what I've found so far. And I think that's so important. And they are getting out there in the community to all the different clubs, and the kids are seeing them. They're seeing their commitment. They're also seeing their skills and ability as they go through a bit of skills training with the women, and see how hard it is to keep up with these women that absolutely at the peak of their fitness and are so outstanding in their chosen sport. So again, I thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Is there any other discussion, councillors? No, we'll put this to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. And our final item this evening is 7.8, parking outside the Glen Waverley Activity Centre. Councillor Salumi, would you like to move this? Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor James? Councillor Salumi?
Mayor, just before you continue, if I would
yes.
move a procedural motion, unless we deal with this in 3 minutes and confidential business, I'd like to move a motion to extend the meeting for half an hour.
Yep, we'll need to leave that till 10 o'clock, if that's all right. Is that right, or can we do it now? No, we can do it now. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Fergus. So all those in favour of extending the meeting till 10:30, and that is carried. Thank you, Councillor Salumi.
Have I got 3 minutes or 5 minutes?
You've got 5 minutes.
Okay. The reason I've brought this forward is because on the 14th of March I attended the opening of, the start of the new Glen, the launch of the new Glen, and I was speaking to Barnaby Judas, and I apologise if his name's said incorrectly, the project director, and John Saville, the director of development of Vicinity Properties, and they were commenting that there was 600 at least commuters that were parking in the Glen underneath in their car park. And during the course of the discussion, it was obvious that they were going to bring in paid parking into the Glen, just like as occurs in Ringwood Eastland now, where the parking is after 3 hours charged. Given the fact that the Glen is going to redevelop and there's going to be around 2,350 employees there, and I think at the time possibly 3,800 car spaces included in that facility, there will still be a need for workers to find all-day parking. We also have an issue with certain car parks that are controlled by council that are being used by commuters that shortly may not be used by commuters. We also saw in section 1.3 that there is a need for new car parks, and that's why the Director of City Development has proposed that we fund another 400 car parks, and that was passed earlier this evening. This is a solution that might work in the interim or it might work permanently, but I do believe that it's worth investigating. That we look at areas outside the Glen Waverley Activity Centre so that we reduce the congestion that's imminent in that area, especially with the commuters trying to find some other car parking, but also because we have commuters from Vermont, Rowville, Wantirna and outside of our LGA. I did discuss this with the Director of City Development, and he has helped put together this motion, and he has also suggested a letter to the Minister for Public Transport be considered in requesting some assistance in providing car parking, maybe that be a park and ride or some sort of external car park where we might use either council land, state government land or private land as considered. I also spent a bit of time at Pinewood the other day, and I did notice that there's reserves underneath the power lines that are not necessarily used to optimum capacity. Some of these things may be temporary, as I said before. There could be looking at something like the Central Reserve or Bogong or Whites Lane Reserve. I certainly don't know all the areas in Monash that might be suitable, nor do I say that all of the car parking should be provided so that everyone comes into Glen Waverley Station. It could be that they go to Sindel or another station. But with Sindel Car Park, that only holds 250 cars, and a train will take at least 1,000 or even 1,200 people. So at this stage we have got an issue with congested trains. We have a congested area with car parking, and given the fact that the school is right near the station, there's also the drop-offs there. So it would be really good if we could have just maybe one bus that rotates and goes around and does pickups and drop-offs for the Glen Waverley Activity Centre workers and or the commuters. So I might add that the beginning of this idea actually came when I was doing my project brief, when I considered that the staff of the council here are issued with 169 permits, and they can use car parking all day in Marriott Parade, Southdown Avenue, along by the Cenotaph and Bogong car parks. And in that case, that they are actually using the equivalent of over 600 2-hour car parks a day that could be used by patrons of Kingsway. So I'm hoping that councillors will support this motion to consider other avenues for parking around that is not necessarily in Glen Waverley Activity Centre. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salumi. Very well timed. Councillor James?
Can I maybe ask a quick question of the Director of Infrastructure? Can you put a very loose time frame on how much work's involved to put this report together?
Look, we haven't scoped up the brief, if you like, for the project, but I think we're looking at a quick scan across opportunities, 2 to 3 months before we narrow down some options. and I think part and hand of that is discussions with Metro and the state government about opportunities to improve their bus services as well, which is identified as part of the brief.
Sorry, I should just clarify. I didn't mean time frame as in how long till the report comes. I mean how many man-hours would be involved in putting this together from a council perspective.
Look, I'd only be taking a guess, but probably 60 to 80 hours, I'd say.
Any discussion, councillors?
Yep.
Yes, Councillor James.
So just through you, Mayor, I'm happy to support this motion, and I'll support the motion of anyone that comes to this chamber seeking report or information on anything that they particularly want to do. It doesn't necessarily mean I'll support anything that comes after the report, but yeah, if there's anyone in this chamber that wants more information to pursue something, I'm more than happy to support it. What I would say in advance of any possible report that came, I'd be very mindful that if we were to implement this solution moving down the track, and I'm not saying that that will be the case, that any such solution must somehow make sure that no commuters are using it. I'm not interested in this council paying for state government parking for their train stations. I'm more than happy to support our residents and traders or staff or people that work here in getting to and from the Glen Waverley Activity Centre, but I wouldn't be interested in taking on a cost burden for the state government. We already do enough of that for them.
You, Councillor James. Any other discussion, councillors? Councillor Lake?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I don't support this because it wouldn't work. There's no suitable land, and there's much better priorities for this council to pursue than officers wasting time on something that will not come to anything. And it won't come to anything because there are a range of reasons, not least of all being that there's no suitable land, that it's not our responsibility. But it's also the time that there is a need for parking in Glen Waverley is not during business hours. It's after dark. It's after about 5 o'clock, and that's when we've got a responsibility to look at parking issues. And nobody jumps in a car to go and park somewhere in the middle suburbs of Melbourne in order to then get on a bus to get to Glen Waverley, whether it's to go and commute somewhere else or to go and access the shops in Glen Waverley. I mean, this is just complete nonsense. It's a waste of time, and if people want to pass this tonight and have our officers go on a frolic, it will lead to nowhere. It is not the best use of resources, and it's stepping well beyond what this council's role is in the services that we provide, to our residents. So, in the same way that there was a range of comments and questions raised around this, not least of all the message that it sends industrially to our staff, the more than 100 people who work in this building. The suggestion inherent in this report is that they are not entitled to have parking provided for them at Bogong. This will lead to industrial action at a time when we are in the midst of negotiating an EBA, which has had some serious setbacks in the last few months. This is not the sort of time for council to be venturing on these sorts of frolics.
Thank you, Councillor Lake. Is there any other discussion? Councillor Choi?
Through you, Mayor. I think car parking issue is one of the important and priority issue in our area. I'm open-minded and happy to support any possible solution to solve the car parking issues. And if you look at the motion, it's a kind of investigation. So I think it's worth going for investigation for any possible solution to deal with the car parking issue, and this is one of the motions I would love to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Any other discussion, councillors? You do, if there's no other discussion, but I did just want to say something. Look, I think as far as this report is concerned, I think it's helpful for us to consider other options. There's definitely pressures on car parking in Glen Waverley. There's no doubt about that. as Councillor Lake has mentioned, I think the majority of that does fall in the evening. However, there's no doubt that there is a lot of commuter parking that happens here in the activity centre. I think one of the things I particularly like about this motion, that gives us the opportunity to write to the Minister for Public Transport and ask for additional commuter parking, which, if we could get it, would be absolutely amazing. I think, it's worthwhile to look at other things. I think it won't necessarily be the right option to look at a park and ride situation. I think there's no harm in investigating it and determining whether it has any possibilities. But for my part, it's the point 3 in writing to the Minister for Public Transport that I think is the key part to this motion, and one that I hope really bears fruit. So, Councillor Salimi, if you'd like to use your right of reply.
Yes, I'd like to make a right of reply because I did actually include the snippet from the local government focus paper that talks about what they're doing in Geelong. They are actually doing this now, so that the people that are working in Geelong are not taking over car parks that can be used for people who are accessing services or retail or any other business in the central business district of Geelong. So it is something that has been used elsewhere. And also, if we don't have a problem with parking, I don't know why we're considering a multi-level car park in Montclair. I think that we do have a problem with car parking, and the reason I also mentioned the staff, I'm not talking about the directors that are here until 11 and 12 at night. I'm talking about those people that are just probably here from, say, 8 till 4 or 9 till 5, that don't access their cars in between time, that could still walk up the street and purchase things during their lunch break, but just get that shuttle to and from their car, and that would alleviate the need for about 169 car spaces for the whole day in those streets. And I might add, if anything goes on the corner of Marriott Parade, that too will be a lot more stretched with people parking to access that new facility, which I'm sure will end up being built on the corner of 15 and 17 Marriott. This is just something to consider. I'm not saying it's going to happen or it's not, but at least let's look at options, because we've got to be creative. The Glen people have already told us they do have 600 car spaces there that are commuters, and it doesn't matter if these cars are commuters or they're not, they are causing us a problem, and we are constantly getting emails from people in surrounding streets complaining about long-term parkers, whether that be commuters or whether that be workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Salumi. We'll put this item to the vote. All those in favour? And that is carried. Yep, certainly. So, division, all those in favour? Councillor Zagrafis, Councillor Salumi, Councillor Fergus, Councillor James, myself, Councillor Choi, and those against? Councillor Lake and Councillor Little, and Councillor McCluskey abstaining. Thank you. Pardon? And yeah, there's no. Yep. Okay, that completes the notices of motion. We now move on to items of urgent business. Councillors, is there any? No? And then councillor reports. Does anyone have any councillor reports? No, Councillor Zagrafis, you go. All right then, thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, at least you didn't call me sir this time. I want to take this opportunity to thank both Ainsley and Christine, and I'm not lost in the irony that the communications manager and our reporter are both leaving at the same time. It seems all a bit familiar, a bit strange to me, and I don't believe in coincidences, but I'll take a bit of time to work out why. I'll start with Ainsley, and as a new councillor, it's daunting, a very daunting thing, and maybe those incumbents can remember back to the first time they were elected, although Paul's memory may not go back that far. It's a struggle when you're first elected as a councillor because you're overloaded with information. But what's more of a struggle as a new councillor is knowing how to communicate, not only within the organisation but with the residents on the other end. I can't tell you how many residents I've had contact me, both with positive and negative responses. And I say to Ainsley, I signed up for Instagram and Twitter when I decided to run for council and I had no idea how to use them. But following the Monash Council, I've sort of picked up a couple of tips along the way, and now Christine and I have a bit of a banter during council meetings, although I've been good tonight. So thank you, Ainsley, and all the best in your future, wherever that may take you. And it's been an absolute pleasure to know you. And unfortunately, it hasn't been as long as I would have liked anyway, probably not the reverse, but certainly for me. And for Christine, again, when I first got elected, I said I'd catch up with a coffee and talk you through some of the things I want to do. Well, guess we can do that, but you won't be able to report on it. So, look, we had a bit of banter and we never got time to have a face-to-face chat, but I do appreciate the banter and it's fantastic, and I wish you all the best as you go forward as well. Just quickly before I sit down, I wanted to just mention the Anzac Day service, as I'm sure Councillor Zagrafis is about to stand up and do as well. I had the pleasure of being down in Oakley yesterday morning, and I went to bed the night before and it was bucketing down in rain. I said to my wife, geez, I hope this stops by tomorrow morning, and I woke up and it was just belting down even heavier than when I went to bed. I thought, Jesus, do I really have to do this? But I got up, got the umbrella, walked down, went down to the service, and I'll tell you, it was one of the best Anzac Day services I've been to. It was recently the time I went to the shrine when I was younger at 12 and 13. It's a very touching moment, and I must admit I've never been to a local dawn service in Oakley. I certainly have around the Caulfield and Glenira areas where I grew up and lived when I got older, but it was a very touching service down at Oakley, and there would have been 400 to 500 people down there, and they braved the rain, and most of them didn't have umbrellas. They just stood there and got wet, and the comment was made to me, imagine what the diggers went through. They didn't have umbrellas, they didn't have any of those comforts, I suppose, that we had, the warm jackets. The gun salute went off, and even though I was warned it was going to be loud, I almost jumped 10 feet in the air. It was unbelievable, and to hear that 24/7, and that's what you hear every morning when you wake up if you happen to fall asleep, is just phenomenal. And the sacrifices that these people made to make sure that we can live in a safe and democratic society as we do today is just, it's almost bringing me to tears now, so I'll sit down before I do get to that point. But I would like to acknowledge those that went before us and those that are on active service even now all around the world that give their lives really to defending what we take and take for granted. Most of us do take for granted. And we certainly use Anzac Day as a way to remember, but the other 364 or 65 days, it's a leap year, we don't even probably think twice, and that's sad indeed, but I'm glad that we do have a national day and that we do take that moment to remember those people who we otherwise don't think of.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Zagrafis.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And I was just going to mention the Monash Business Awards luncheon on the 19th of April. Gavin Smith was the guest speaker. He is the President of Bosch Australia, which is a company that's at the forefront of innovation. And Gavin Smith spoke about the Internet of Things and the interconnected world of which the future will hold. And that's an example that was mentioned was being at work and then being able to do the washing at home from your office, from your phone, and other examples. And technology which is rapidly progressing, and by the year 2020 I think there'll be 50 billion items, whether it's a washing machine or a fridge, that will be connected to the internet. This is just incredible. One of the messages to our businesses was, if you ignore the internet, your business will fail, because it's just, as I said, a pivotal part of it. Live streaming of council meetings is an example, and I think the Federal Parliament will be considering electronic voting in the chamber so that MPs can stay in their offices and vote on bills and motions without having to go physically to the chamber. That could be something that might come through this chamber at some point in the future. And technology is incredibly, and it goes back to regulation and regulation not being able to keep up with those technology changes. So I thought I'd just mention that. and I was there with Councillor Salumi and Councillor Davies. I think there were, no, I think Stephanie Perry was there, but I think there was a few apologies from Councillor James and Patterson and others. So that was, I'll finish there because I'm sure that Councillor James's recollection of the Anzac services was adequate without having me to repeat some of that. And I look forward to hearing from our businesses about their ways of creating innovative measures in Monash. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zagrafis. Any other discussion, councillors? Thank you, Councillor McCluskey.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you again. I feel like I've been up most of the time. Apologise for being up all the time, but just a couple of things. I just want to echo of course, the Anzac Day ceremony. I was fortunate enough to attend with you, Mayor, the Waverley RSL. I apologise if I missed anyone else that was there, but the Waverley RSL sub-branch, Councillor Choi, sorry, Councillor Choi, I didn't see you there, but I'm sure you enjoyed it as much as I did. But to George Cooney and his organisers at Waverley sub-branch RSL, it was fantastically done. The speakers were great. It was just a good service, like everyone else. But I just think it needs to be mentioned because I'm not sure you could ever mention it too many times. But and the young students from Glen Waverley Secondary College spoke beautifully. Everyone did, and it was just another river sort of ceremony. It was really good. I was fortunate enough also to attend the Monash University Blue Sports Awards with the Mayor and Councillor Zagrafis. Another good night, and following on from lots of other things we've spoken about tonight, it had a sport theme to it, but we were fortunate enough, the Mayor and I, just sit on a table of three young ladies who were most entertaining, and they were the 3-on-3 champions or national basketball champions or something, so they were really but beautifully presented and spoken. Spoke accolades for their character, in my view, and the synergy and the relationship between Monash Uni and the City of Monash from our discussions there that night is ever increasing, and it's a really good one. So it was a good way to keep that relationship going. And just finally, I'd like to congratulate Leon Ross, who was the president of the Mulgrave Country Club, for his award. He's a gong he got during the week, and that was for the Community Clubs Victoria President of the Year. And Leon's been involved and a member of Mulgrave Country Club for in excess of 20 years, on the board for 13 and president for 10. And he has been an advocate in a number of areas, not just for the club itself, but all the sporting and different groups attached to the club. But also he set up the scholarship program for some underprivileged students, and they give them, I think it's $2,000 or $3,000 each to help with their studies and continue and keep them in school, and lots of good things come out of that, and Leon was the catalyst for that. So I'd just like to put on record that I know it's a Mulgrave Ward thing again, but it's a significant achievement. There's lots of community clubs, and it was a deserving gong for Leon, so I'd like to congratulate him on that.
Thank you, Councillor McCluskey. Councillor Choi.
For you, Mayor, such an honour and pleasure to join the citizenship ceremony on Monday night with Mayor, Councillor Fergus, and we have the federal and state MP joining that ceremony as well. And also on Tuesday morning, again, I went to the Central Reserve for the dawn service at 6 a.m. and Mayor was there, and it's very impressive that people come at a very heavy raining time, and but still got good photos. So what else? Probably that's it for what I've done for this week, and yeah. After the dawn service, we went to the RSL Glen Waverley Club, and we have coffee, tea, and enjoy time with people. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Choi. Is there any other reports, councillors? Councillor Salimi? Thank you.
I'll be brief. I went to the Highvale Retirement Village for their Anzac Day service. It was the day before Anzac Day, and it was officiated by Lieutenant Colonel Rusty Adams, who is actually a Salvation Army chaplain, and he had a few little anecdotes there. It was well received. It was a beautiful day, so I was very lucky that I went on Monday afternoon rather than Tuesday morning. And I'll also reiterate what Councillor Zagrafis said about Gavin Smith, the president of Bosch, who was talking about cars that park themselves, and we don't really need to have them with us all the time. We can just call them and they just go and park themselves and then come along. And he was also commenting on how now so many more things will be more like Uber Eats and Uber cars, and totally different situation to what we're used to. So he was a very entertaining speaker, and it was a pity that you were unwell, I think, Rebecca, because you really missed a fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Slimming. Councillor Fergus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to add to Councillor James's comments, just thanking Ainsley for her service. I've got a bit of an example of that. Since the last council meeting, I've attended two listening posts run by Monash Council, as well as my own neighbourhood meeting. There was the one in Warrawee Park, and there was one that Councillor James and I actually asked to be scheduled at the Notting Hill neighbourhood house to hear from the residents of Notting Hill about some of the concerns that they had about the local area. Now, Ainsley scheduled that in, and I think as a result, 3 out of 4 weeks on a Saturday morning, I think she was at a listening post, which I think is extremely impressive and a real example of her continued dedication. So we are going to miss her, and I thank her very much for her assistance since the election towards the end of last year. Wherever is lucky enough to have her in the future, I'm sure will be very jealous of them for a good amount of time to come. I also attended the Clayton and Clarinda Community Leadership Group, and Mick McGinn from VicPol was actually there to speak with that group at my request, and I think that was very well received. I believe Councillor James you were there as well, weren't you, Stuart? And that's, as always, a very committed group. I also attended the annual general meeting of the Oakley and District Historical Society, and there are potentially some quite exciting changes occurring in the society in the near future, so watch this space. I hope that we're able to have a bit more to do with the society and integrate them a bit better into the work of council. I was also, as Councillor Shoy mentioned, I was very pleased to attend the citizenship ceremony on Monday evening. It's always a great event, and I just want to wish all the new citizens of Monash very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fergus. Is there any other? Councillor Casares? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Casares. Is there any other discussion, councillors? Well, I'll just briefly say it's lovely to hear that so many of the councillors enjoyed the Monash Business Awards and the guest speaker from Bosch, who, as the chair of the Monash Business Awards, I arranged to come and speak. So it's great that so many people got so much out of it, and the feedback from the community that were in the room on the day is just like yours, that they were absolutely fascinated with what he spoke about on the day. So that's fantastic to hear. And just a minor correction I have to make. The lady that walked in tonight, she walked in, I actually know her because I went to visit her at her property. She lives across the road from the Gardeners Reserve that we made a decision on. She was unhappy and was objecting to the decision. She walked in late. After we'd already made the decision, and I sent Ainsley a message and said, this woman has come in and doesn't know that she's actually missed the decision. Would you mind tapping her on the shoulder and explaining that to her? And she did, and I thank you, Ainsley, that I can ask you to do something like that, because I think if that woman had to sit here for another hour until we got to the position where that report would have naturally come, it being item 2.3, that she would have felt very upset to sit there for that long and realise that the report had already been decided upon, and certainly not in the way that she was hoping. So Ainsley spent good 45 minutes out there speaking to her and undertaking to come back and talk to her again tomorrow further about some of her concerns. So I agree. I don't think that there's many staff members in other councils that would sit here through the council meetings and then be happy to do something like that, and to take that amount of time with just one of our residents, and you do that with every one of our residents that you come into contact with. You give them your ear and you give them your time, and you undertake to leave them feeling satisfied and listened to. Yeah, we have been very lucky to have you for this period of time, and personally, I just wish you all the best in everything you do, and I hope to still keep in touch with you even after you leave, because I very much enjoyed working with you for this period of time. Thanks, Ainsley. So, councillors, if there's no other reports. No, we'll move on to personal... sorry, we need to extend the time.
Move another procedural motion to extend the meeting by half an hour, although I doubt we'll need that long.
Okay, all right. Do you have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Casares. All those in favour of extending the meeting for half an hour? That is carried. We'll now move on to personal explanations. Is there any councillors? No? Matters of council importance, sorry? No? Thank you. And that brings us to confidential business.
Mayor, I move that in accordance with Section 89(2) of the Local Government Act 1989, that Council resolves the following items to be considered confidential business, given that it contains some proposed development. A matter that may prejudice the Council.
Yeah, go and get Norm. Sorry, he forgot his briefcase.
And that the meeting be closed to members of the public.
No, that's right.
See ya.
And do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fergus. And all those in favour? And that is carried.